Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the table in the hall. If you've not picked up an agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. If you wish to be included in the mailing list for a decision, please add your name and contact information to the sign-up list located on the table in the hallway. And if you wish to testify, please fill out a yellow comment card. We will follow the basic format listed on the back of the agenda. It includes all the hearing procedure steps. We may vary from the process based on the specific circumstances of each hearing. The first item on the agenda is the approval of two recent meetings, and I would ask the commissioners if anyone has any corrections to make to the January 28th meeting minutes.
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the notes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as written for January 28th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Does anyone have any corrections to make to the February 11th meeting minutes?
No.
Nope.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the notes as presented and as amended.
I would like to make a motion that we accept the February 11th, 2020 meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The notes for the January 28th and February 11th Planning Commission meetings are approved. Are there any information items from the staff?
I've got one. In anticipation of completion of work on the comprehensive plan, we're moving forward to create a comprehensive plan implementation committee, and Commissioner Edge and Commissioner Loosevelt have expressed interest in serving on that committee, with Commissioner Edge as the primary appointee and Commissioner Loosevelt as the alternate. On Saturday, a couple members of the council and a couple members of staff conducted 12 interviews for candidates and have selected 8 members to then go forward and join 4 members of the CPAC to form that committee. And the council will be approving a resolution to that effect on Tuesday. So we'll have, I think the first meeting in March, we'll have a report about the work program, kind of how we see that going. So that's what I've got.
Okay. Very good, thank you. At this point, there's an opportunity for the audience to participate through commenting on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Not on tonight's agenda. If you wish to comment on an item that is not on the agenda, there's time to comment for that presentation. So I will ask if anyone wishes to comment, and I believe Mr. Kraska has so indicated. Mr. Kraska, if you want to come up and provide your comments.
Thank you, Chair Massey. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, planners. And so I'm going to make my comments very brief tonight because I know you've got a lot to work on. I wanted to take just a minute or two of the 3 minutes to give you a chance to just read the document that I passed out.
Sort of looks like testimony to me, you guys.
Say again?
It looks like testimony on the topics we're going to be talking about.
So this information is simply to bring to your attention information that was never included by the planning staff for technical or space reasons, and to summarize what is the most important points of previously submitted testimony. My only other comment is to thank you for all your hard work and for reading the document. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kraska. After reading the document, I would concur that the document is about the comprehensive plan, and so we welcome you to comment, but we can't make part of this part of the public record at this point because the public testimony has been closed for some time.
And it will be opened when you forward this back to the council, so whatever comments folks may have, they'll be able to raise those at that time.
Yes, as we've mentioned several times, there will be an opportunity in a public hearing with the City Council and continuing with the work of the CPAC. The next item is file number S 2018-001, 55th and the Railroad Subdivision. And I would ask the staff if to bring us up to date there, because I understand that will not be following the traditional role of a public hearing.
Yeah, the request tonight is to continue this subdivision request until March 24th, at which point we will be opening the public hearing. We've gotten new materials that have been submitted that address the issues that had been outstanding, so we fully expect that at that meeting we'll be re-notifying surrounding neighbors, so we'll have a hearing. People will have an opportunity to comment on this. But tonight, I think all we're asking is that you open the hearing and immediately continue it to that date.
Okay?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question, Chair Massey?
Yes, please do.
So this is part of the Linwood NDA, and they meet on the second Thursday in March. And so hopefully if that material is going to be resubmitted, that could be maybe resubmitted a week ahead of time so that the land use chair could review it and bring it in?
The material's been submitted in the file, and staff over the next couple weeks is going to be preparing the staff report. If the Linwood land use chair would like to come in and talk with us, we'd be more than happy to review the material, or we could send it out. I mean, whatever the preference.
Well, it sounded like that you were going to resubmit it anyways and
Well, our staff report would be going out, basically a week before the Planning Commission meeting on, so March 17th, we'll probably be sending out the staff report.
Okay.
So I don't know if how that works with the timing for Linwood.
I'll inform the land use chair and the Hector Campbell land use chair as well.
Okay.
Well, and Commissioner Hemer, we just received the new materials, but we can post those onto the land use application page on the city website.
Oh, that would be great. And then
Yeah.
I'll inform them to let them know to look at it, because both of those meetings are coming up.
Yeah, those materials become part of that record.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some protocol we need to go through here. So the public hearing on the subdivision development for 55th and Railroad is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider the application, which is S 2018-001. The commission initiated this hearing on September 24th of 2019. It's been continued several times, the most recently to January 14th and again tonight. So if there's any other deliberation, let's...
I'd like to make a motion to extend the application S2018-001 to a date certain of March 24th.
Continue.
Continue. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So the next agenda item is public hearing on file CPA-2019-001 Comprehensive Plan Draft Policy Documents. And the public hearing on that subdivision, got to get to the right script here. The public hearing on this file number, CPA 2019-001, is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider legislative amendments to the Comprehensive Plan Policy Document. Commission initiated this hearing on January 14th and has been continued on January 28th and February 11th, and again to tonight. We're in the deliberation phase of the hearing, meaning both the record and public testimony are closed. So I need to, again, ask the commissioners, does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest?
No.
No. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain?
No.
The staff, I would ask to provide your update from our last meeting.
All right, thank you, Chair Massey. Commissioners, David Levitan, Senior Planner. So as Chair Massey mentioned, we are now in the fourth meeting of the public hearing for consideration of the updated comprehensive plan policy document. At this evening's meeting, as indicated in the staff report, we are proposing that commissioners review the policies that have been edited since your last meeting. At the February 11th meeting, commissioners deliberated on policies in Section 1, Section 4, the majority of Section 7 with the exception of Section 7.4, and then Sections 9 through 12. The packet includes just one attachment. Attachment 1 is a updated track changes version of the policy language, which has incorporated all of the edits that staff has made in response to commissioners' deliberation on February 11th. So our recommendation for this evening is for you to start by providing any additional input or any corrections or edits that are needed to those policies that were deliberated on at the last meeting. Following that, we propose that you continue your deliberations on Section 7, which would be on the remaining goal and policies within Section 7.4, and then the final section of goals and policies that need to be reviewed are Section 8, which is the urban design section. Following that, there was some interest from commissioners at the previous meeting to also look at the overarching section goals. Commissioner Edge had provided an analysis, I believe, on February 3rd, and then it was included, I believe, in your February 11th packet on some analysis, how to tie it to the vision, some potential changes that could be made to those. So staff wasn't sure if commissioners wanted to review all 12 of the overarching section goals or just the 5 overarching section goals that had not been pinned down by council. Those would be sections 1, 2, 7, 8, and 12. So it would be up to the commissioner's discretion as far as if they'd like to review all of the overarching section goals or just those 5. And then following the deliberation and discussion of the actual goal and policy language, staff would like to have any final proposed edits or changes or additions to the remainder of the policy document. So the introduction, the background sections, graphics, maps, all of those things so that we can incorporate those into an updated policy document that we would bring back on March 11th for the plan and request that the Planning Commission make their
March 10th,
make their recommendation to City Council at that meeting. I would note that we had made an error on the agenda on the look ahead. We hadn't indicated that meeting. That was an oversight on our part, so we apologize for that. But the plan would be on March 10th to make the formal recommendation to City Council after commissioners have had an opportunity to review the updated policy document.
And again, our target is to have that material come to the council on April 7th, but they would hold a hearing on the comp plan on that date.
So I just want planning staff and the commissioners to be aware, Commissioner Travis and I will not be attending that meeting. So that means that that all 4 of you need to be available and show up.
Well, if you,
No,
No, March 10th. I'm going to the police dinner that
okay.
night.
Well, if you give us clear enough direction tonight, you don't have to have that meeting. It's true.
Yeah, there's no requirement that we revise the document before. It was just, I didn't realize, or I had forgotten that you wouldn't be available at that meeting as well. I had known about Commissioner Travis's absence. So, yes, as Denny mentioned, that would be an option if the full commission, or at least the 6 of you, would like to.
Another option would be to hold a special meeting. We could do that if we needed to, in order to hold it on another date, and then.
We'll figure out a way to do this, but let me just do a quick straw poll. I can make the next meeting. You said
Yeah.
you could.
It-
Okay, so it looks like it's doable.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So, anything else, staff?
No, that's it.
Okay. So this will be a little bit repetition. I do want to give the commissioners a chance to revisit the sections that we went through and staff updated. And so if you're like me, you spread these things out all over the dining room table and go compare and that kind of thing, and do your own sanity check. So rather than open it up to general comments, I'm just going to go section by section and see if anyone has any comments on those that we tried to pin down last week. So section 1.
I'm good.
I guess I have just a little bit of a reaction to the overarching section goal with, in the last sentence of that, the meaning is that people, we really want to engage people that haven't always participated, but the wording is, I don't know, that who, as well as people and groups who have been traditionally left out of the planning process. And I guess when I think about it, it's not that they've been left out, it's that maybe our techniques haven't really engaged them, or they haven't, participated for one reason or another. So, and I don't want to start this off with the wordsmithing kind of session, but if I wasn't here last week, and if it was kind of really important as to why we worded it and phrased it in that way, then.
Well, let me suggest that you hold that thought,
Okay.
because we need to get to the overarching goals, and section
Okay.
1 was in there.
Okay.
And we have some recommended language that's been proposed by Commissioner Edge. And so I don't want to cut you off now.
Yeah.
But I think that we'll have a spot to address
Okay.
that in more detail, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on section 1? Section 4?
I have no comments for section 4.
Okay. Can we move to section 9?
Yes.
So I did have a comment on section 9.4.7.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking I may have the wrong spot, sorry. Nope, I'm good, sorry.
I have no comments.
Okay,
Well then.
Just moving it along.
section 10.
No comment.
No comment.
Section 12.
I have no comment.
Section 11. These are a little bit out of order there. I put them in the order that we attacked them last meeting, yeah.
No comment.
And 7.1 through 7.3.
We got rid of the quotations around middle housing. I have no comment.
Okay. Anyone else?
None.
Okay. So at this point, I think that we can move to 7.4.
Chair, are we going to repeat the same process that we did in the last meeting where we went over Commissioner Edge's comments first and then?
If I may interject on that, I don't believe that that's necessary in this case because I was starting to use a shorthand at this point because the important thing was to establish a pattern that could be repeated. And so if you look at the 7.4 policy language I recommended, it is all shorthand. And so I don't believe that it's necessary, with the exception of maybe 7.4.5 and 6. But beyond that, I think we don't really need to focus on my suggested language for this section.
Okay, so 7.5 and 7.6, is that what I heard? 4.5?
Right. Right. So we can just look at the others first.
I'm sorry?
We can just look at the regular policy language that, review the other policies first. We don't necessarily have to focus on my specific.
I'm sorry, I'm unclear what you want to, what do you want to comment on?
I'm just saying that we don't need to focus on the language that I'm suggesting until we get to 4.5 and 4.6.
Okay, all right. Any comments on 4.1 through 4.4 then?
I like,
Oh,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I like the change in 7.41, which is from a public comment, and the addition of that foster development of accessible community gatherings places. I think that's a much better phrasing, and thank you, staff, for recognizing that change.
So you're good with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was going to suggest that 7.4.1 was maybe wordy and unnecessarily so. Is there denser development in centers and neighborhood hubs? I'm not sure if it's necessary to foster development of accessible community gathering places, commercial uses, and other amenities that provide opportunities for people to socialize, shop, and recreate together.
So you think that after the "and," that whole entire sentence should just go?
Yeah. I was going to look at the definition of neighborhood hubs and see if, assuming it's in here.
Neighborhood hubs should have a call-out box, I believe.
It is in the definitions.
Intend to provide neighborhood gathering places and locations where residents have relatively easy access to a variety of services or goods near their homes. Hubs are envisioned to vary in size and intensity. They could be as small as a neighborhood tool library or as large as a cluster of mixed-use buildings with housing located above shops and services. I don't know, kind of, if you call out neighborhood hubs, I'm just suggesting you don't need to further call out the amenities, but
Well, I think the way that I'm reading this is that it's talking about three different areas. And so it's talking about denser development, neighborhood hubs, and corridors. And so even though the neighborhood hubs calls out fostering development of accessible community gatherings places, blah, 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 but it's also supposed to mean that for corridors and for denser development centers as well.
centers is also defined here, and so is corridors. I don't know,
Right, but what's your definition of corridor?
well, corridor is more simple, streets that serve a major transportation route for people and goods and are extensively served by transit.
Right, I think this idea is, in the livability, you are implementing standards in these three areas for the reason of accessible community gathering spaces, commercial uses, and other amenities that provide opportunities for people to socialize, shop, and recreate. That first is just using the noun, and then the rest of that sentence is the verb.
It's goal language, not policy language. But in the spirit of a lot of these other policies being, kind of soft and nice feeling, then, it kind of does, it is a little wordy for a policy statement, but it gets its point across, I think.
Okay.
It could work as two also, two policies.
No, that's not it.
No?
I'm not going to stand my ground on this one, but I'm just saying it's redundant because it's defined as such in the glossary. But I'm happy to be squishy and get extra bonus points for extra syllables in this policy.
Maybe what makes it confusing is that if we get rid of the first, because isn't it this the list, that foster creation of denser development in centers, comma, neighborhood hubs, and along corridors, right? I mean, that extra "and" is a little bit,
Yes.
it makes it a little confusing in there.
Sure.
And then get rid of the "that" before foster. And foster development of accessible community gathering spaces. What you're doing is you're throwing in a preposition I don't know, it's a preposition, right? That doesn't need to be there, because really what you want to do is you want to do the same verb. Because you need a verb.
Anybody else want to chime in? And
Well, I think that Commissioner Hebers, I like those changes that he offered up. I think it reads a little bit simpler.
It's either that or you get rid of the "and" after corridors and
Create a new policy.
say that foster development.
Oh, yeah.
What this is saying to the city is use your land use and public investment decisions and standards to help create, one, denser development in the centers, neighborhoods, hubs, and along corridors, and then also use those land use, public investment decisions and standards to foster development of these accessible community gathering places, commercial uses, and other amenities that provide opportunities for people to socialize. So there's really I think the problem with this policy is that it tried to jam too much into one policy. So I think those are two distinct things. One is denser development. The other is these gathering places that are defined as, gathering places and commercial uses and amenities. So it's telling us how to try to foster those. So I'm a little bit I think the first part is important, but it's just too much in one policy.
So what you're saying is basically put a period after corridors and then create a new policy that says use denser development in centers, neighborhood hubs, and along corridors to foster development of accessible community gathering places, commercial uses, and other amenities that provide opportunities for people to socialize, shop, and...
I could even break the format worse than that. I could go implement land use and public investment decisions and standards that, semicolon, small a, foster creation, blah, 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 go down to the next one, small b, foster, and foster development of accessible, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
So you put it in the same policy, but you just have two separated...
Two parts to the policy that says use these strategies. On the other hand, you guys can do whatever you want. I'm trying to make sense of this.
First comment was that it's defined in the glossary, and so.
Well, only neighborhood hubs defines that, not...
No.
The corridors
Centers
and-
are commercial, community service centered, according to the glossary, which community gathering places is basically neighborhood hubs, commercial uses, and other amenities is basically centers. Shops is in the definition of a center, but
Yeah, all those things are hubs. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what, right.
So this is the policy for implement land use and public investment decisions and standards. And so it's what is that action trying to do? And so it might make sense for legibility to break it into sub-items, A and B, like Denny was saying, because the policy is about what are we implementing land use and public investment decisions and standards to do for livability. So if you want legibility there, then I think that what Denny offered is probably a good alternative to what we're looking at here.
you want to restate it, Commissioner Edge?
Sure. So policy 7.4.1 would read as implement land use and public investment decisions and standards that, and then a list with a little a would be foster creation of denser development in centers, neighborhood hubs, and along corridors, semicolon. And sub-item B would be and that foster development of accessible community gathering places, commercial uses, and other amenities that provide opportunities for people to socialize, shop, and recreate together.
I would get rid of the and that and just put foster.
I'd keep the and right after the semicolon.
Oh, yes.
And then B.
Good correction. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I'm good with it.
It's fine.
Agreed.
Okay. I think we have agreement on 7.4.1.
I have a question about 7.4.3. Just that the public realm, I think, is a little bit confusing for me in this circumstance. I think what you're saying is that, you know, in thinking about livability and what we want is that people are able to, you know, it facilitates engagement with people, with the people scale. But just the wording, like the public realm is a little bit
Yeah, wonky.
wonky to me.
Is public realm in the glossary?
Yeah.
It is not.
Is the upper realm, the lower realm? Like, my daughter's reading Harry Potter, and I'm like thinking about the
We do use that term elsewhere, and so it
Realm?
may, in public realm
public realm.
specifically.
Okay.
And And so it may warrant being defined.
Well,
Or we can just choose other words.
you know, one of,
Ways to get
it's
it.
this-
But-
how does housing engage? That's the other problem
Right,
here. It's
the
like-
verb.
Yeah, yeah, so it's,
Doesn't
you know,
match.
it's about designing housing that relates to or.
Is not
you know,
walled off from.
Integrates with public spaces.
Yeah, but it's like trying to, but it's also engaging the public realm is trying to somehow activate the street and kind of create it. What this all means is put a front porch on the front of your house, or have a very welcoming entrance, or provide some windows, or otherwise do some things at the front that invite people,
Activates.
you know? So,
Yeah,
Activates?
activates, I like integrates too.
That's the
Supports
idea.
the public realm, supports, I don't know.
I think, I agree with you, the public realm needs to be in the glossary, or probably better to just not, if we're going to make this more legible to a wider audience.
Are we going to suggest that we find where we use the public realm in the other parts of the?
I mean, that feels like the natural next step, right? If we're uncomfortable with that term here, then why wouldn't we be uncomfortable with it where we've used it, where else we've used it?
Right, or the other option would be is define public realm in the glossary and.
Commissioner Heber, I knew that we had just made that change. It's in policy 10.6.1 where we had changed transportation corridors to the public realm to kind of expand. So if you look at policy 10.6.1, that was a proposed edit from Commissioner Edge at the February 11th meeting.
To add public
The
realm?
change, it previously only referenced transportation corridors, and transportation corridors were changed to the public realm. And so that maybe has a little bit different context. So, you know, maybe it needs to be changed in one place or the other. Or maybe the definition that gets added to the glossary needs to be inclusive or expansive enough to cover a variety of different things.
But it means both the same thing,
Yeah,
right?
generally.
Interaction.
Yeah, the interaction, I mean, I think the way that we had originally intended it in 10.6.1 was a little bit more limited on the transportation component, but I think the way it's phrased now is a little bit more, made it more similar to what we're calling out in 7.4.3. So I think that a simple definition could cover both. So sorry if I kind of danced around that.
Nope.
No, I think that's true, and I mean, the purpose of using that in 10.6.1 was to, you know, expand beyond simply transportation corridors and encompass parks and plazas.
Right.
And granted, you're probably not going to have parks and plazas in front of residential developments. You're going to have public streets, you know, and sidewalks and things. And so the public realm in the context of neighborhoods is largely the streets, you know, and that's the public asset that's in the neighborhoods is the public right-of-way. And so,
But you want, even in your transportation, you want it to, you know, play well with the street and the whole night, no matter what,
well, yeah.
right in the public realm. So, I mean, I think that a very simple definition of what public realm is in the glossary then kind of helps us in this manner. If we want to define public realm here, and then we just.
No, that's fine. I think maybe it's just then a different verb, because housing, so I was thinking it was either, you know, to integrate or support the public realm versus engage with.
Complement.
Complement,
Interact.
interact,
That's more along the lines of what I would like, but.
to interact.
But complement, I think, might be less,
Yeah,
a little, I mean, you know, I like interact, I like engage, but I think that complement, you know, is a good.
complement. Yeah, I think that's a good verb.
What about activates and supports?
I like both of those.
Well, activate would mean that we're really looking for the code to be more prescriptive, I think. You know, to complement it, I think allows for a little bit more flexibility in where, what zone we're maybe looking at or what's around it. I don't know.
Maybe it's more contextual or contextually sensitive.
Yeah, I think that I like that, the flexibility for that. I mean, the idea is there. We don't want people to be building like 12-foot fences and walls around their properties, fortresses.
So as I understand, the proposal is to change engage to complement and to provide a definition in the glossary of public realm. Because I think public realm, you can go, I mean, if you just leave it to people's imaginations, I mean, there's a lot of definitions that could come up, I think. And so I think if we want to use that word, I think it's appropriate in some places in the document that we nail it down. So
Okay.
is
I like
that proposal okay with the commissioners?
Yeah, so staff would work on the definition for public realm, and then we would change engage to complement, and that's that.
That's
All
that.
right, thank you. Let's move to 7.4.4.
Were there any comments on, were there any comments on 7.4.2?
I didn't hear any.
Like we,
Not yet.
I guess the question is about how new housing projects. That signals to me that it's like multifamily versus like a house, like an infill house. Is that what or like
Are you going to 2?
7.4.2 require that new housing projects improve the quality and connectivity?
Oh, yeah, right. I think that could just as easily be developments.
Developments? Yeah. I think that's better.
Getting rid of housing projects?
Getting rid of the word projects, because I'm like, well, what's a project? Is that,
Why wouldn't you just say require that new housing? It's either new development or new housing,
Yeah, I'm fine with either of those.
because development encompasses
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. I think that's, I mean, I know we're already in the housing section.
I guess for those of you that were in CPAC, was this supposed to think of subdivisions more than individual buildings, or?
Yeah, that would be my question, too.
Well, I think that was the intent, that when you say housing projects, it means the development of some type of housing project,
like
whether it's
more than one dwelling?
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I think
more than two. Right.
Well,
or 1 2-family dwelling, or
I think it is more on the larger scale towards subdivisions when you talk about connectivity. I think there was some discussion of recent projects like King Road subdivision and others where there maybe would have been opportunities for some more direct access or things along those lines.
and that was a partition, only 3 lots. So, I mean, we have,
That's right.
but I think this does imply more than one.
development captures partitions and subdivisions as well, but we could also be more specific and just say, subdivisions or land divisions, if we don't mean any construction of a 2-family or more dwelling.
It might mean an apartment building, though,
Right.
Which would cover development.
I think it does. I think housing development
Yeah.
is the best term.
we could just say new housing development projects.
Well, I think my suggestion would be just say that require that new development improve the quality and connectivity of active transportation modes.
Yes, please.
Good with it.
Say that again?
Require that new development improve the quality and connectivity, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I mean, we're talking about housing,
Yes.
yeah. So I think housing needs to stay in there.
I think housing is implicit.
Oh, okay.
We're in the housing section.
All right, I'm good
We
with
just
it.
used the word development in
Yep.
the other ones, so.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's consistency also.
Yeah.
Maybe isn't as soft and squishy, but it's consistent.
Okay.
Can't be too soft.
So as I understand it, the consensus is remove housing projects and insert developments.
Yes.
Okay?
No, development.
Development,
Singular.
Okay, got it.
singular.
Okay.
7.4.4, what is adequate access?
Wait,
What is adequate access?
adequate and usable open space.
They have access to adequate,
Okay, yeah,
But
what does
adequate mean?
Usable open, it's like, not good, but just not bad.
Oh, I think that's referring to the quantity, an adequate quantity. So some kind of
Oh, okay,
amount of space.
Per park.
okay.
like a formula,
Yeah.
Yeah, or,
would be created through code.
I don't think it's just calling for an adequate quality. I think it's calling for an adequate quantity.
That was the intent, but I can understand if you read it straight through that it could be implied that way. So if you have any suggestions.
well, to me, adequate means if, you're building 100 apartments, your open space shouldn't just be a small patch of grass. It should be able to serve the people and that also means that you can have slides and swings and
So should
that it's adequate for the people that are using it.
adequately sized
No.
open space?
I think just adequate is good because it leaves it open to, well, if you're, let's say you're going to open an apartment that you're only going to give to young women of single children, right? Well, your park should not be a skate park, or it should not be. It should be adequate to the people that are going to be using it. Slides and swings, and it shouldn't be a golf course. Let's put it that way. But it should be adequate for the use of what's. Do you understand what I mean? So
I
adequate
did,
kind
but
of
I
leaves it
didn't
a little
read
bit
that at
open.
all when I read this the first time. I wouldn't have gathered that conclusion.
I really thought it was about the amount
Yeah.
of open space.
That's what I thought too. And right now in our code, what remind me of what we have related to this?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but we have requirements for public and private open space. So the private open space are small, 6 by 12 patio type spaces. And then for multifamily projects, you've also got to provide a larger recreational area or open space. There's for like a common play area. And that, I think it varies by size. I can't.
It does, and Mary has the code, I don't have it in front of me. I think there's a threshold for where I believe common open space kicks in as far as the number of units, so that like a triplex doesn't
Right.
need to do it, because a triplex is technically multifamily under our current code. But it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to have a large playground for 3 housing units.
Should we just replace adequate with adequately sized?
Or adequate amount of usable open space, or
Proportioned?
Proportional both.
I think have access to adequate amount of usable open space.
An adequate amount of usable open space. I'm with Kim.
Okay.
You want to repeat that one more time, Kim, so that
That multifamily housing units have access to an adequate amount of usable open space.
Oh,
staff, you got that one?
we do.
Okay. 7.4.5?
I did want to introduce a couple changes to this one, but it's just I mean, it may not, so what I had proposed was to, if you ignore through the zoning ordinance part, it's just to change development or design requirements to help create transitions, to implement design standards to transition. It's more succinct. And so rather than help create a transition, you just do the transition. I
Okay.
guess I changed requirements to standards, but, whatever. I'm not really married to any of that language. I just wanted it to be a little bit more
You want to get rid of the word
succinct.
help?
I think help is unnecessary. Help
Yeah.
create
Right.
is unnecessary.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Why don't you just go through and give us the changes as you would propose?
Implement design standards to transition between lower and higher density residential development areas where the mass, size, or scale of the developments differ substantially. Requirements could include massing, buffering, screening, height, or setback provisions. That is largely unchanged. It's just the first few words
Okay.
that are
You want
changed.
to hear that one again, staff?
So I've implement design standards to transition between, and then the remainder the same?
Yes.
It's easy.
And I think my suggestion would be to leave development in there as well.
It would be consistent.
Development and design standards. I think you kind of want both in there, don't you?
I don't think it's necessary, but I'm not opposed to that.
Is code taken out in 4.3?
Yeah, I mean, development standards would be probably something other than the building.
Today, we have both separated. We have development standards that deal with setbacks, heights, those types of things. And then design standards are what you do to the design of the building, provide a porch, deal with the materials, those types of things. So we have both types of standards that we apply.
Let's use development and design standards.
I think that's the safest approach here.
Okay. Everyone good with that?
Yes.
7.4.6?
Can somebody explain to me what intentional communities are?
So intentional communities are co-housing, other types of places where people have deliberately, kind of as opposed to your typical having your own home, separate private property, have chosen to come together in kind of a more communal living arrangement, so.
So not all, I'm sorry, all intentional communities, I'm sorry, all co-housing is intentional communities, but not co-housing is not all intentional communities, right? Am I saying that right?
You're trying to.
You used co-housing in the definition of intentional community, so if they are synonyms, then we don't need that intentional communities in there. But if co-housing is an example of one type of intentional community, then
It helps to offer some insight to the reader who doesn't know what an intentional community is.
Right.
But I agree with you.
right. I mean,
Could you define intentional community in the glossary?
We don't have it currently, but we can. And when this was proposed by CPAC members, they did give other examples. I would need to look back at.
well, so why don't we just say reduce development code barriers to intentional communities that help foster a sense of community?
It sounds a little redundant.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
Well, basically, what I did is I got rid of co-housing and other types.
I
and
don't
just
like how
put
it ends
intentional.
with, yeah, I don't know. I'm being nitpicky about the words, of course. But I think using examples is probably helpful, but in this particular case, but if we have a call out then, or a definition, then it's probably fine.
Yeah, if we changed it to just read intentional communities, then we could have a definition.
You know what would be a lot better if we would say reduce development code barriers to intentional communities like co-housing that help foster a sense of community.
does those last 4 words need to be there? Or the last 5 words? That foster a sense of community, is that really necessary?
I think if we, in the definition, if we say what the, what the purpose of intentional communities typically are, it probably wouldn't be needed at the end. But
Right.
7 words.
Is that a term of art, intentional communities? I mean, I'm not
it is, yes.
familiar with that. Kim, maybe you got it too?
Well, I remember the discussion at
Yeah.
CPAC, and like David said, there were a few
Others that,
examples that popped up.
yeah.
Well, like Howie's old property, the one that was, I always call it the hippie commune, but the one off there at Stanley, where they never really divided the land, but they had 6 or 7 houses on there, and it turned into a big kerfuffle. But
We were just looking at this subdivision on an unrelated note, and I don't think the name of the subdivision was the hippie community. But
Such as a hippie commune and other types of. And also Stefan Lashbrook gave an example for he's got some neighboring properties that they could all open up their backyards and have common space. And so that would be an intentional decision that they're going to sort of live as a community and have this shared space.
It's in Wikipedia. An intentional community is a planned residential community designed from the start to have a high degree of social cohesion and teamwork. So it's a thing.
Definitely a thing.
just
There
because
are real-world
Wikipedia says it
examples.
doesn't mean that it exists.
tried to make sure that most of our policies are real things.
So with that definition, is that different than co-housing? I mean, when I think of co-housing, I think of like a boarding house.
No.
No, 21st, no.
Well, isn't that what co-housing is?
No, I mean, think of having apartments or condos or whatever, and you have a large community kitchen, and everybody participates in, and there's group dinners, and everyone participates in.
Yeah, like a boarding house.
Co-housing is defined in the glossary. There's a definition.
But it doesn't have to be like a,
Well, I know, I get it, I get it,
You're
I
not
get it.
necessarily renting a room, you have,
Shared space.
it's intent, you've gone there with the intentional purpose, using that word again, of wanting that sense of community.
No, I get it, I get it.
Okay.
I would suggest that intentional communities becomes part of the glossary, and then we keep it as is.
Oh, yeah, I don't like how it reads as is. I would like to do reduce development code barriers of it, or to intentional communities like co-housing, period.
Yes.
Period?
Yes.
If we're calling out co-housing, I think some other examples that have been said exist but not defined would help me. We have other policies that have examples, so I'd say what are these other examples? Otherwise, I'm with you, Greg. Reduce development code barriers to intentional communities such as co-housing, X, Y, and Z from Wikipedia.
If you want to put in hippie commune, I'm okay with that. But you understand what, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Have more than one example if you're going to have an example.
So I guess, yeah, if that's the direction, I guess what would commissioners prefer, to just have it end with intentional communities and then have the glossary include a whole list of types, or do you want to, we haven't been entirely consistent with how we've used lists.
I think intentional communities is kind of a weird enough, I don't want to say weird, that's not the right thing, an unknown term
Anomaly.
that if you put a couple of examples behind it, it will help explain it to the reader, and they don't have to go flip to the glossary if they don't have to. I mean, if you want to put shared backyards or, whatever the examples are of that.
And if intentional communities is not used anywhere else in the document, it doesn't belong in the glossary. Define it where you read it. The
It could be a
glossary-
call-out box.
It's used in the definition of co-housing. Sorry.
It could be a call-out box on the same page.
Yeah, it could be a call-out box.
And then that way, at least it connects the reader's eye directly to the definition of the thing, and if it's not relevant anywhere else in
So put the
document.
examples in the call-out box?
Yeah.
So as I understand it, the proposal is reduce development code barriers to intentional communities.
For intentional communities.
Okay, for intentional communities, period. And then there would be a call-out box that would have the examples.
Yeah, some kind of,
Explain what, right.
what we mean by intentional
Right,
communities.
intentional communities help foster a sense of community with,
Space.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah. Okay.
co-housing and boarding house,
Hippie commune.
hippie commune.
Look at Wikipedia,
Can you work with that direction?
We can.
Awesome.
We'll invite you to the first party at Steffen's when that happens.
7.4.7.
I'm good with that.
Any comments?
Yeah,
You good?
yeah.
So do you want to do the A-B thing instead of the
Yeah,
1, 2?
That's what I was going to say.
That's the only thing. I
Oh,
think,
yeah, let's
is
be
just-
consistent.
Yeah.
And do it in the format that you're going to do the other one in?
Colon.
Yes.
This was one of the policies that I put forward, by the way.
It's an excellent
Thank
policy.
you.
It's our favorite.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am really fond of the performance tracking policies.
Yeah.
It's a great.
I love
yeah.
all this.
So, yeah, staff got that, just to make that consistent?
Yeah.
Okay. 7.4.8?
Is that a repeat of 7.4.7?
Not,
Well, I
Recalling
think
our conversations about auditing. What section was that in?
well, so I mean, each one of these goals in section 7 has one of these policies to develop, monitor, and periodically update metrics that evaluate the city's success in achieving the goal. That's just kind of it seems to be boilerplate for each goal section, each goal subsection in section 7.
Why did we only do that in section 7?
I don't know.
Why did 7 get so
probably
much
because of
love?
me. Because I said, we've got to measure it
And
with
audit
the
that.
housing. But I don't know if we really need 7.44.8.
Okay, but every other one does.
Okay.
Put it in there, leave it in there then. Yeah, it seems like to me that was just a repeat to make it consistent.
If anything, 7.4.7 is kind of the odd one with the other sections where we're actually just specifying the specific metrics that we want to
Right.
see under 7.4, whereas the others, it's more hand-wavy.
Actually, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know that 747 belongs entirely within the livability goal. It seems to apply across multiple goals, and so maybe it is captured by the boilerplate.
This should be passed on to CPIC, that here are some specific suggested metrics that could be implemented to cover the various
Yeah.
7 points.
But, you know, if we're trying to look at the success in developing new housing and preserving existing housing for households of all income levels, household sizes and housing tenure, I think, well,
Yeah, that covers some of
success
the-
in developing new housing and preserving existing housing, and infrastructure improvements needed. Yeah, it's a little different.
I found where it was at policy 1.3.3, evaluate the success of community involvement activities regularly and make results available to the community no less than annually.
Right.
Do you remember that conversation? I
Yeah.
don't know if we should pick any of that up, but we talked about it at length.
Well, if we wanted to maintain some consistency through section 7, would it be reasonable to leave 7.4.8, at least the verbiage, that one sentence as it is, and then sort of fold the A and B sections underneath it? That would give you some sense of continuity, maybe.
That's where I was intuitively going as well.
Me too.
is maybe calling out the 1 and 2 of the 747 underneath what is currently 748.
Yeah, then that would become 7.4.7.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that. I think that, the reason that we talked about it in livability, right, is we're thinking about how do we help keep people in Milwaukee, and how do we know that the policies that we're creating are, benefiting the people that are here as well, and thinking about how we measure that and track that, and that's important to livability.
So I have a problem with rolling it into 7.48, because it sounds like that all you're doing is creating 7.47 and not capturing the other ones. I personally would just leave it as is, except for the A and B, because we don't talk about the new housing and preserving of existing housing for all income and household sizes and housing tenure at all in this section, nor do we talk about infrastructure improvements and need to accommodate future growth. And so if we just say develop, monitor, and then we put those two things down there, then it doesn't sound like that you need to develop and monitor any of the above.
So I would argue that 1 is captured by equity and affordability metrics, goal, or policies. And then 2 is captured by 7.4.
Now he's going to make me go back to my...
Maybe 7.4 and 7.3, but I think that we're establishing that we don't really need 7.4.7, because I think those metrics that it's looking for are captured in the metrics for these other section goals ultimately.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Commissioner Travis.
I don't know. I don't really argue for very much around here, but I would say that,
What are we missing?
well, tell me where you see these same ideas.
Well, when we're talking about success in basically meeting our housing goals for households of all income levels, that's affordability as well as equity. Household sizes, equity. Housing tenure, equity. And then infrastructure improvements needed to accommodate future growth targets is livability. And to some degree, infrastructure is covered in sustainability as well. And so if we already have metrics to monitor our housing goals or how we're addressing our housing policies across all these other goal areas, then I think that it captures the spirit of what this policy is going for. And I'm happy to hear and entertain how we might be missing something.
So you're saying that we're already evaluating
Equity, affordability,
the 1 and 2
yeah.
within these. And so when we have like 7.1.10 under equity, that it's implied that we're measuring these things in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate not wanting to miss anything, and so I agree we want to make sure we're not missing anything. But I think the spirit of what you're getting at is captured by those other goal areas.
Okay.
So as I understand, the proposal is to eliminate 7.4.7 completely?
Yes.
Eliminate my policy, that's fine.
I didn't want to do that, but I think that logically, I think we've solved the logic puzzle and that it works without it.
Okay. Well, I'll evaluate that when we're evaluating later.
Very good.
Okay. Is everyone good with that proposal?
I'm good with it.
Got that, staff?
We do.
That one's easy, right? So the last 7.4.8 now becomes 7.4.7, and it's
Sorry.
a repeat of the previous sections.
You shouldn't have said how much you loved it.
Are we ready to go to section 12?
8.
8.
8.
I got excited. I thought we were going to vote.
We've already
I'm
done
sorry, you're
section
right.
12.
You're right.
So again, we can either briefly discuss the overarching section goal at this point or tackle that when we're going through all of them comprehensively.
Was this overarching section goal provided by the CPAC or by some other process?
It wasn't by the CPAC, and so I think it warrants, a good amount of discussion, but it's a question of whether we do that before you go through the underlying goals and policies.
I would say it can wait until we discuss the section goals that
I would
did not
kind of
come
like
from the
to
CPAC.
group those together if that's
Yeah.
okay.
I agree. Let's be consistent.
Okay.
We love
All right.
consistency.
Goal 8.1, any comments?
Um, 8.1.1 G, I'm not sure why we need local and regional in there. For visitors, types of visitors.
Oh, just
I
as
mean-
well as visitors?
Yeah, I mean, it could be international visitors, we don't list all the types of visitors, so.
Extraterrestrial? Is
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
everyone good with that? Just remove local and
with that.
regional?
Visitors from the public realm.
Okay.
Or was there another public realm that
No, I just-
got me excited?
Okay. So we didn't get any comments on the goal 8.1. We're on policy of 8.1.1 and A through H. We just talked about G. Any other of those subparagraphs? I guess I really don't understand the concept in C of mode split targets.
So, what you're trying to do is design a transportation system that will efficiently serve a certain volume of people, that are doing different things. And so, mode split targets are how you would kind of spread out the traffic among, walking, biking, transit, single occupancy vehicle, whatever. And so each of those is a mode, and then each of those has a certain target percentage
It is in
of
the
trips.
glossary, mode split.
And so the idea is that you would set the targets for how many people are traveling by each mode and then try to achieve those.
Would it be helpful to say establish targets for mode split?
It's something that's somewhat common in transportation systems plans.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. But it's not common in everyday language.
Common folk.
Yeah,
It's not common.
Not common in your everyday language.
okay. Is there a way that we can make it more relatable? That's my only point.
I agree. If it needed a,
Well, you could do a picture of a mode split target as a call-out box. I've asked this question
Yep.
before, I know. It seems like that we've gone through.
We've talked about it a number of times.
And I know that you guys have, I know the picture. I mean, I can see it right in my head. It's the 2 lanes with the trees and the people and the bicycle.
No, it's basically percentages
yeah.
of, how many people bike to work versus how many people drive to work versus how many people take
It's data.
transit to work.
So,
Data.
So when you said picture, I was seeing a pie chart.
Right.
no, I think Commissioner Hamer is referring to like your typical cross-section of a street that shows, where the pedestrians are, where the bicycles are, where there's a bus lane, where there's,
Right, but with the,
And you could put percentages under each lane, to show how many travel, what percentage share of each of those lanes is
they make
carrying.
it relatable.
I don't think we should put the percentages in because we haven't set the percentage.
Well, I mean,
Well,
right,
okay,
yeah, I'm
so
just
it's
saying how
like
you would document. I agree.
I mean, this is a directive for future work.
Right.
So, I guess, how much of this needs to be called out in this particular section?
I think the important part is the first part.
Yeah.
The second part is sort of telling you, be serious about this and set these targets.
Yeah, when you get to doing the TSP.
I think it's a helpful directive to have in policy, but I'm not opposed to changing the language in some way that continues to capture the spirit of the policy.
Is there anything else in here that references or gives direction to the TSP work? And is there a place to put those items together, a grouping of recommendations for the TSP?
I think each of the, sorry, Denny, were you?
I was just going to say, on the same page, just the last one on this page references the TSP. There's a, I don't remember how often we mention it.
I mean, that's just one way you could kind of group things.
I don't think it's a lot, though. You know, it's.
So,
I mean, would this still have the same meaning if we just said establish targets in the transportation system plan for alternate transportation modes? Would that still have the same meaning?
I think so.
yeah.
God, could we not use alternative?
Active, is that
Right.
what we're using?
If you'd
do
like
that
it to, or you could say active transportation and transit, or
All?
all.
I like all. So how do folks think about this one? Establish targets in the TSP for all transportation modes.
And that's it on the goal?
No, the first sentence.
The first sentence.
First sentence stays.
First
Okay.
sentence stays.
All right.
We're just getting rid of mode split targets, or mode split.
Everyone okay with that?
Still establishing targets, I think it's great.
David, you got that?
Got it.
Okay.
And alternative is now all.
All, yeah.
Are we attempting to get rid of mode split in other locations, or are we just,
How many other?
it's in the glossary?
Yeah, how many other locations are we using it?
Well, probably be all over the TSP,
Yeah,
which will be
it
Yeah,
part
so
of
leave it
this.
in the glossary,
Yeah.
I can search to see if it's anywhere else, and if it's not, then we would remove it from the glossary. If it's nowhere in the document, obviously don't need it.
Well, wouldn't you want to reserve it for the TSP? though?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Don't we have another transportation section? Or is that totally, that's an answer?
Well, we would. I mean, when we update the transportation section, then we would need to update the glossary, because I'm sure we'd be introducing additional terms.
No, all right. That's
Either way,
fine.
yeah.
Whatever.
Let me,
Float your
yeah,
boat.
we can take a look.
Okay. Okay. Any other of the subparagraphs in 8.1?
So I want to just mention H, because we had this conversation about only using one example. Uses such as Milwaukee's Farmers Market. I originally wrote down "and First Friday." But if this document lives for 30 years, I don't know if we should call out specific events that may or may not be existing in that time.
We use that principle with respect to the school district and the parks provider, so I think that it's appropriate to consider, events like that in the same context. We don't know that they'll be around under the same name 20 years from now, so.
No, but you are going to have a parks provider because you have to.
Yeah, I know, I'm just saying, it's the same.
Have a school district.
It's the same context, though, that we don't know what names, we're
Right,
not
so we-
using specific names
right,
for
so we
things
didn't
that we
use
know will be
NCSD,
here, so
right,
why
right,
would we
right.
use specific names for things that we don't know will be here?
Move them to a
So I
column.
agree, yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I think
okay.
I completely agree with what you're saying.
So either, I would just not use, just cross it off at uses such as Oh, I'm sorry, and event outdoor uses, period. And then cross off.
So
the
including
such as
special events and outdoor use, and outdoor
uses, period.
stays?
Yeah. And then cross off such as Milwaukee's Farmers Market.
Okay.
What if that said the Milwaukee Museum?
Denny,
I'm
didn't
sorry.
you want to be
about such as-
ambitious
could
and
help.
efficient?
Well, one is not downtown Milwaukee, but
Way to go, Denny.
That was a low blow.
It was.
I mean, it may not be there in 30 years. I can't predict the future. Of course, if I'm still around, it will be there.
How about such as farmers markets and festivals, if we wanted to keep examples and acknowledge that Milwaukee does value farmers markets, but we might
right.
get, maybe instead of getting rid of one, we'll add another.
We did have one over the spring and summer up in Ardenwald.
I like that. I like the idea of adding festivals.
Such as farmers markets and festivals.
You know what? I'm fine with that.
I am
Fine.
too.
Yeah.
Yes, 2 farmers
Fun.
markets.
Kim gets, is that recover?
And this won't go down as the meeting where Greg killed the farmers market.
No, but it will go down as the meeting that Commissioner Burns is now in charge of Milwaukee Days.
Or Denny tried to kill the,
Yeah, they tried to kill the museum.
David, did you get that last twist?
I did.
Okay.
Delete all references to the museum.
Perfect.
navigated sarcasm well. Good job.
Okay, we're going to 8.1.2.
Do we just want to ask if there's anything for 8.1 generally, or do you want to go one by one?
Well, I thought we did.
Yeah, I've got one for, just a question about A. And so this is specifically targeting large sites in the central Milwaukee area.
Wait, which one?
Sorry, A,
Under,
under central Milwaukee. It's just saying increased
under 8.1.2,
connectivity should
okay.
include pedestrian and bicycle improvements through large sites in central Milwaukee. So it's just,
Yeah, well, that was written at a time when we were thinking about bike connections through both the Murphy and McFarland sites. Now, what is happening with the McFarland site behind the shopping center is that bike connection is at the perimeter of the site. It's not through the site. And we're going to be doing a study to look at whether or not the bike connection goes through the Murphy site or around the perimeter of the site. So I mean, I'm glad you brought this up because I think there's a question about the word through. Large sites specifically are, you know, the hillside.
right.
And those two other sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe as well, the shopping center site. You know.
is large sites defined?
It is not, but,
Is it commonly held as 5 acres or more?
yeah, we could put something like that in, I suppose, if we needed to.
And would that capture any of these McFarland site or any of those?
Yeah, I think there's a code provision that sets a size limit for this type of thing, and let me check that real quick. If you want to move on to another
Okay.
one while I'm searching that, that would be good.
Were there any other items under 8.1.1?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we moved on to 8.1.2, central.
Well, I know, but I thought,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, no, what I was saying is I have no comments under any of goal 8.1.
okay,
And so I was asking if anyone else had anything under 8.1, not 8.1.1, but 8.
back to 8.1.2. So any of that,
Central
subparagraphs.
Milwaukee.
No.
We do have a public comment on D that says manage the height, bulk, quality, style, and form of building, and setbacks at a scale that fits with what has been historically permitted in the neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. And the note says, staff would like guidance from Planning Commissioner on January 28th on whether it believes the level of detail proposed in these edits are appropriate for a comprehensive plan.
So was there one addition, meaning height, to that?
Well, there was height, quality, style, and then the addition of the idea of a setback.
We got rid of the term, we got rid of style and quality, where a similar comment was made throughout. I forget what section that was.
I think
It
we
was
got
within-
rid of it because it didn't belong, but here we are in urban design where it maybe warrants consideration. We were pulling it out of like the affordability and equity sections because we didn't want to talk about style there.
Right.
Okay, interesting.
So, I mean, the idea here is not just for the central Milwaukee area, but the idea is on like transitions in general, right? And so we talk about transitions in all of these sections, in the hubs and so forth. And so I think as long as we're consistent in how we're talking about transitions.
Are you talking about 8.1.3 or 8.1.2?
So
We're talking about 8.1.2D, and it may come up again.
I believe it comes up in other sections where we're really prioritizing this idea of transitions and making sure that we're considering how it fits, how the scale of development fits in relation.
So here we go. In 8.1.3 in E, it says, ensure that new development is designed to create a transition to adjoining residentially zoned properties in terms of height, massing, setbacks, and building form. Which that seems to me,
That gets more at the public comment.
right, that seems to me to be the right three words to use.
Height, massing, setbacks, and building form?
Right, so manage height, massing, setbacks, and building form to provide a transition between central Milwaukee and adjacent areas with a lower density residential comprehensive plan designation.
And so then I guess further on the next section, which is neighborhood hubs, 8.1.4B, so then we're talking about the scale and transition, but that's looking more at like what's been historically permitted.
Well, but that's more about the neighborhood hub
Right.
building itself, that's, the mixed use, it potentially in the center have large buildings in it. But then when you get to the edges, you kind of feather it out to make it more look like the residential neighborhood that surrounds it. The neighborhood hub is just one or two buildings. And so the neighborhood hub thing is about fitting it into the traditional scale of the neighborhood.
So, right, I agree. When we're talking about transitions, I don't think we need to be talking about these other things. I think that it's pretty clear that what we're doing is transitioning to the residential area that the more intense site is adjacent to. And so height, bulk, form, I think those are the right setbacks. Those are the right words. I don't think we need the extra words.
So then what we need to do is change 8.1.2D to mirror 8.1.3E.
Right, so you would say manage the height, massing, setbacks, and building form of buildings to provide a transition between central Milwaukee and adjacent areas with a lower density residential comprehensive plan designation.
Does that make sense, David, Denny?
I hope David was paying attention, because I was trying to find
Denny's still doing his research.
size, but I'm not finding it.
Couldn't it read exactly the same as 8.1.3?
Right.
Have 8.1.2D read the same as 8.1.3E?
Oh, yeah, sure, that,
No, is that what,
That's my suggestion
it,
it makes sense to me.
Just to be consistent with the idea of transitions, and I think in both of these sections that the idea is the same between NMU and Central Milwaukee.
It definitely can, if that's your direction.
Were you thinking, I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a question of what, yeah, if you want the exact phrasing and the verbs to be the same and consistent,
I
then,
think it helps.
as opposed to just incorporating those 4 items that are included and
Yeah.
appending them.
There are two ways to say what's essentially the same
Same thing.
thing. If there's any, I don't think there's any intent that these policies do different things.
Correct, I agree.
Use the same words.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Commissioner Travis, as a member of the CPAC,
Yeah.
when you read policy 8.1.4B, where the term historically permitted is used, what are your recollections about the way that the CPAC felt about that terminology?
Yeah. Well, we did have a lot of discussion about it, and, it's the idea, what we, I think, came into agreement with the CPAC was we don't want to do anything that, excludes certain types of developments based on historic patterns. So I guess that's why I'm like, we considered it quite a bit, thinking that, neighborhood character, is the way we used to talk about these things, but then now it's, we're trying to move away from that idea that we're preserving and keeping things forever the same. And that's why I think that the idea is that we are open to housing choice. And so we're putting things in this document that talk about transitions and talk about scale and getting at kind of the idea of compatibility, but trying to not be so exclusive.
If I could add in, I think some of the discussion and some of the differences between 8.1.3 and 8.1.4 are that for the neighborhood hubs, so in the NMU zone, you can go up to 3 stories. There is some additional bulk and form beyond, your typical, I guess the majority of the city being detached single-family residential. And so that is larger in bulk and size and scale than maybe even directly adjacent areas. The areas that don't warrant that neighborhood mixed-use zoning that are neighborhood hubs, a little bit smaller in scale. Probably the issue of compatibility is a little bit more, important to call out within the policy language, I think was what went into some of the differentiation between how those are worded and why that historically permitted kind of is a remnant within the neighborhood hubs policy, but not really in many other areas. That's the way that I remember
I
it.
think that's right. It's just that, the hubs aren't necessarily, I think we had 11, how many different hubs did we have, Mary? 13? So some of them aren't envisioned to actually be big commercial centers. Some of them are just, sort of the existing neighborhood services that we've got, and some of the little stores, like that little store on Monroe, that might not ever be much bigger than that, but it could be somewhat bigger. It ought to transition if it does.
Some of the neighborhood hubs in the study already have NMU zoning, and that's why there's kind of that differentiation between those within the zone and those without. And I think the plan was for some of our commercial areas, I think one of the hubs is at King and Linwood, the southwest corner. And so that has commercial zoning, and there's been some potential discussion in the future of, are we going to maintain that commercial zoning, or are we going to kind of convert some of those areas to mixed use as well? So those areas obviously they're already commercial in nature, and they already are permitted to go up to 3 stories. So.
Yeah. I forgot. Yeah, so not all of the hubs are in NMU, and so that's the idea is that.
Yeah.
So is there interest in not using the historically permitted language on the
No, it's a little bit of a confusion point, I think, because really the CPAC, we did talk about all of that quite a bit and really wanted to, send the message that our recommendation is to make sure that we're not being exclusive.
I prefer the language compatible, and I would rather leverage, the language from 8.1.3E and say something like ensure that new development in a neighborhood hub is designed to be compatible with adjoining residentially zoned properties in terms of height, massing, setbacks, and building form.
I think that's a much better approach.
That might be a good idea. The term that I hear used that I would think is appropriate is contextually sensitive, and so that a development is contextually sensitive to its location. But that may not, those are planner words.
Well,
I like compatible.
Compatible.
why don't you just make them, in here, we may not want to put setbacks. Because
I don't see setbacks in here, actually.
If we were to reuse the language.
if we were to reuse the language, you might not want to
Oh,
put
yeah,
setbacks
sure.
because, it's 20 feet from the curb, and maybe you want your commercial building a little bit closer up front. So I wouldn't use setbacks, but I wouldn't mind saying that it has to fit within the zoning criteria that it lays in. So in other words, if it's in an R5 and it's not an NMU, that it can only be, it can only sit on a lot a certain amount of size, has to have the same amount of kind of windows, eyes on the street or the compatibility with the public realm, and 2 stories or 35 feet, right? 35 feet high?
2.5 stories, 35 feet.
So these are neighborhood hubs that are in R zones.
Right, they're all in residential zones.
No, not all of them, no.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
These are referring to ones that would, even if it was in an NMU zone, you could still use the NMU zoning.
Not necessarily. I mean, what we haven't figured that part out yet, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's like, some of them are zoned NMU, some of them are zoned residential. Do we use an overlay zone on the residential to deliver the commercial use? Oh, we don't know. Do we rezone those to a neighborhood hub zone?
Well, I'm trying to think of all of the little places that already exist as what we would
Yeah.
call neighborhood hubs.
Yeah.
And all the places that have potential for development to go beyond that. So like the Linwood and King is a great example. You could actually do 2 or 3 story buildings in there and nobody would ever notice the difference around in that area because it's the major street thing. But that Home Avenue, if you were to put a 3-story tall building there, it would stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
So if you just leave it within the scale of whatever the zoning allows, and that would help you guys actually work out the math on what to do about building heights and zoning in the NMUs and the CLs and the CGs and whatever you want to do.
I sort of think this generalized language that we had here was sort of intended to do just that. It was.
Right, but we have problems using historically
permitted.
permitted. So
get you.
the idea is that, well, you just make it what the zoning permits, which
Is the same
would
as
be actually the definition of historically permitted.
Well, not necessarily. The current zoning designation is not necessarily historically permitted.
Right. So,
Do you like compatible
I do.
Well, I think you can be compatible while still allowing it
or
to be
compatibles?
right up against the street front. Like if it was an actual commercial storefront, you don't want to have a 20-foot setback just because it's in the R5 zone. You want to bring it up to the
right, well,
public
so
realm.
I would say height, massing, and building form,
Can I
right, and not put in setback.
ensure that new development is at a scale that ensure that new development is compatible with the height, bulk, and form of development of adjacent residential properties?
is adjacent.
It's used in the
Yeah, oh, yeah,
8.1.3E. I'm just trying to,
Oh, yeah.
get some consistency.
I think that captures it.
I like it.
Can you do that one more time, Commissioner Burns?
Ensure that new development is ensure that new development is compatible with the height, bulk, and form of adjacent residential development.
Can we call it height, massing?
Height,
form?
massing, setbacks, and building form are,
Yes.
ensure that new development.
We don't use bulk in the other one, but massing is bulk.
Ensure that new development is compatible with the height, massing, and form of adjacent residential properties.
Building form?
Yeah, we should put building
Building
form in
form.
there.
You have that, David?
I do.
So are we squared up on the ones that have overlap between 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4?
So 8.1.2 point D would essentially replicate the language in 8.1.3 point E, and then 8.1.4 point B, Commissioner Burns
Yep.
has it slightly different, but ensure that new development is compatible with the height, massing, and building form of adjacent residential properties.
Yep.
Okay. So we skipped around a little bit back there. I'm going to ask people if they'd like to go back and see if there's anything else they want to talk about in 8.1.2. But I think that was good discussion to try to weave those three things together, yeah. Anything else on 1.2?
Do we have any other transition speak?
I didn't see any yet.
Corridors, maybe?
Yeah, in corridors,
E.
E talks about transitions.
Corridors.
Yeah, but that's about development intensity.
Well, it's about the transition between development intensity
It's
on a
not
corridor site
Right, it's
to
not
adjoining
about
areas.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, it's not about buildings.
Well, it has design standards. Maintain development and design standards that provide for a transition.
It's the same thing, whether, it's
Yeah, I
the
get it.
development site, it's going to be building.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a corridor is just a street, though.
Has
It's a street and an amount of space on either side of the center line of that street.
Right, and so I don't know if I necessarily agree with the statement that it needs to have the same height, building, massing, and that. I think that if you're going to do a corridor on a major street like King Road, I think you can get a lot bigger building on there than you can in the middle of a residential area or in a transition to a residential area.
So
I would
you
not
think
agree-
that
I would not
you think the
agree with that.
transition language that's already here is sufficient, and we don't need to make it consistent with the others?
I could agree with that. It's a different type of transition.
So transition could be step backs on the backside of a building or things like that, whereas on the King Road side, it might be a little bit higher. There are different types of transitions that, you typically get to in the actual code language as opposed to trying to tackle it.
Right, or you have a bigger yard, or your green space, you shorten up the building to have bigger green space. You got to have 40% trees on that property anyway, so you got to figure out how to get that there.
I mean, each of these policies has a sub-policy for the transition to the lower intensity adjacent uses. And, it's just a matter of whether you think that this language is sufficient or if we need to be consistent with the others.
I would not want to restrict corridors to massing size of the adjoining properties for the very simple reason is that if you think about King Road and what is on there, nothing matches up with each other anyways. When you got, you know what I mean? I mean, you could have a 3-story apartment building there very easily, and it matches in with everything, but the zoning typically, because it's still an R7 zone or an R10 zone, what is it? It's an R7?
R5, and then kind of depending on where you're at, turns into R7.
And so, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
your
that's fine.
court, if you have a major, it's, to me, major roads can have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, that's fine. I just, I'm satisfied because there is a transition bullet under that policy. That's, what's important to me. So it's, however we want to do it is fine.
Okay, last call for 8.1.2. Anyone have anything else? Let's go to 8.1.3.
And we already revised E,
Yep.
or matched
Yes.
the language there.
There's no objections. I'll shift us to 8.1.4.
Please.
What is, on E, explore innovative techniques for waiving or deferring full site development? What was the intention there?
It was some projects, again, my favorite example is the little commercial store there on Monroe at home, right? And if they wanted to do basically anything on that site that required an improvement, an outdoor seating area for a restaurant, we would make them do so much stuff. We'd make them put in curbs, manage the parking, manage the it's just, the code requirements today sort of prevent this incremental change. And I don't know what the total answer is. Like, how much improvement before, you want them to do these things. But I mean, the way it is today, the cost of making the improvements doesn't correspond to sort of those incremental amenities that you might want to see there. So,
Yeah.
Should it say something about incremental, instead of, because it's accommodate a variety of startup uses? I mean, what you just described is not necessarily a startup use,
no, it's not. It's
but it
an
is about
expansion.
adequately proportion development to the improvement.
Right.
I think, Denny, we had explored with the CPAC this idea of like pop-up,
Right.
and that idea of like kind of market testing the market to see. And so this would like allow for something different that wouldn't need that upfront investment in order to see, all right, does it work if I like put this taco truck here and put some.
Or a little
seating
coffee
outside?
stand or,
Yeah.
Okay, maybe startup is not the best, or
That might be
maybe
true.
startup is exclusive.
Could be, temporary or incremental expansions or something
Yeah,
along
yeah.
those
why
lines.
don't you just cross it off? Provide for a high level of flexibility in design and incentives to accommodate a variety of uses.
I think that's maybe too broad in a way. I would think maybe adding pop-up or incremental expansion, those two concepts might be good to add to this.
Because then, you could develop code that would put some parameters around it.
Yeah.
So startup, for the first year or something like that,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a startup. I mean, if it was an incremental expansion, like a restaurant adding an outdoor seating area, but then the SDCs or whatever improvements that they'd have to make proportional to the amount of area outside that they're now adding in, for restaurant use might be out of proportion to, the benefit, to, the investment that would be required, and so it would discourage the investment. And there would be a community benefit perhaps to something like that. So, so yeah, an incremental expansion, I think it captures that. Startup or incremental expansion.
Say temporary or incremental expansion? Is a pop-up temporary?
This is what I do: startup / pop-up, comma, incremental expansions and temporary uses.
Don't do the slash.
No
Put a comma.
slashes. I like slashes. Okay. That works too. I was trying to keep it to 3 rather than 4, but that's okay.
Yeah. I'm okay
I
with
think
that.
I think
3 or 4.
the pop-up is covered by the temporary, so it's a question of whether.
That may be true. Yeah.
I agree.
we should probably put it in the glossary.
Pop-up?
Yeah, people might not know what that is.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I mean, I
Pop-up
We could
business?
choose not to use it. It could just be startup, incremental expansion, or temporary use.
Pop-up's kind of like
It's pretty faddish.
it's a faddish, thank you.
I mean, this document's going to be however many years
It would be
old.
really dated in
Be really
20
dated.
years, yeah.
We talk about
I'll tell you what, you won't find it in the glossary. Faddish. Mr. City Attorney.
All right, so incremental expansion.
Getting snarky, it's time to keep going.
Right.
Well, I guess we would assume a
Yeah,
pop-up
or,
is a temporary. Yeah,
not previously, yeah.
So why wouldn't we just say
Got that one, David?
new?
it fits.
instead of
David, you got
startup?
that?
Oh, yeah.
Can you, just the phrasing of the 3 terms, like the order of how you would like that? A variety of,
What are you saying?
startup, temporary, and then
Incremental
incremental.
expansion.
Incremental expansion. Because that makes sense. New to, well, actually, it
Testing
should be
market.
Yeah, testing market, and then something that exists that you're expanding. That makes sense.
John, what
I
do
was
you
trying to
think?
figure out what startup
over here.
meant and how it was different from just saying new, and Commissioner Edge said a startup is something that's both new and small.
I think that's true.
But we're getting rid of
Do
that.
we need to put it in the glossary? I hope not. I would make it plural, though. Startups, temporary uses, and incremental expansions, so that they're all plural.
Okay.
We're good with that.
Okay.
Fine.
We'll let the grammar police go over that on March 10th.
Mrs.
More
Zanarini?
innovative techniques.
Okay, David?
got it.
Okay. Anything else on 8.1.4?
Just a question of why we need, in C, why we need to have recognizing that a storefront environment is not mandatory in a hub setting.
Probably don't need it.
Cross it off.
Kill it.
So just period, ensure new development contributes to a pedestrian-friendly environment along the property frontage.
Yeah,
Period.
I agree. That was,
Okay.
Okay.
8.1.5.
A question about, like Johnson Creek is part of the North Milwaukee Innovation Area, right? I mean, that's what runs along.
No,
No.
North Milwaukee Innovation Area is the area on either side of 99.
Johnson
Mark
Creek, the
off there.
creek, not Johnson Creek
Oh.
Boulevard.
Oh, sorry.
The creek. Thank you. Yeah, the creek. So, and we call out the other,
8.1.7B.
yeah. So we call it out in the Johnson Creek Industrial Area, but not in the North Milwaukee Innovation Area.
I'd support adding it. I think the reason that it's not here is probably because of that there's a plan that already exists for NMIA.
Okay.
And so this is kind of like the,
The overarching,
yeah, I mean, so, right, so anyway, we're kind of backfilling the comp plan to refer to, to have policies that support a plan that already exists and is
Okay.
already adopted. But I would absolutely support adding a completely verbatim
Yeah, I don't think it hurts anything.
okay, so.
protect Johnson Creek
catch.
and the adjacent riparian areas as a sub-bullet under,
81.1.5, so add protect Johnson Creek and the adjacent riparian areas.
Okay.
Yeah, I would put that as C and then move C and D down. I don't think you want that as your last statement. I think you want implement provisions of North Walking Innovation Plan, at least as your last statement.
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else in 8.1.5? Okay, 8.1.6?
Do we need a call-out box for Daylight the Creek?
What do you mean call-out box? What, or, I mean, I know what you mean. What do you,
On B.
what would be in the call-out box?
An explanation of what daylighting creeks is and why we might want to daylight that, that creek in that industrial area. That would be what I would put into a call-out box around that. But if we, if we're satisfied
In
that,
like, instead of piping it in a culvert,
yeah,
daylight it?
Correct.
Yeah,
Bring it to the
Okay.
surface.
that's a good suggestion.
It is in the glossary. It's a question of, if you'd like it as a call-out box as well.
I like the idea of calling it out.
It is in the glossary?
Daylighting is in the glossary.
I like the idea of using a call-out box to be able to provide some context for this specific
That's very big.
policy, for the daylighting this creek in this industrial area that we're talking about in this policy, rather than just generally daylighting creeks. That's what I would use a call-out box for here specifically, is what is called, I know you can look in the glossary, but also why is that important here? Why would we be doing that here? It's just, helpful side information if someone's interested in it, and if we don't think it's invaluable, then that's totally fine.
I mean,
The policy's here, that's what's important.
I agree with you, but I think it could be, I don't know, I don't want to call it a slippery slope, but this is because Commissioner Edge likes this policy, it gets a call out. Is that sufficiently,
It's
from other
completely up to the commission whether there would be value to that.
The call-out box purposes is so the reader can easily identify something that may or may not be familiar with them. So we had a question of what daylight means here, even though it's in the glossary, but it may raise enough questions to a lot of people that a quick reference is probably needed. And I would say that daylight is something that is an unfamiliar term to 98% of the people that are reading this. Well, I shouldn't say that.
but you said
To 98%.
I said I personally would like some detail about the context of this
this
policy.
specific creek.
I mean, yeah, if we're calling out, if we're putting a call-out box here, because this is where we're calling out, this is where we're talking about daylighting a creek. I don't think there's other policies or areas where we're talking about daylighting creeks.
It does show up in other places.
I thought it did as
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah. Like on page, I'm looking, policy 823H,
Oh, we're not there yet.
and I think it's also in the natural resource section of the code.
Okay.
It's definitely in here multiple places, Joseph. And most of them were you suggesting that we put on it.
I don't think a call-out is a bad idea on 816B. It just didn't seem as it didn't follow as logically to me as other places where we've called call-outs, and so I was wondering if it was just something that you're particularly enthusiastic about and wanted to call it out for that reason.
I was asking the commission if because it just seems like it's this little tag on the end of the policy when you look at 816B.
Does it need to be its own policy?
No, I don't think so.
Daylight?
This is the sub-policy that's focused on the natural resources in the district and the waterways in the district that connect to it, so.
Protected natural resources, and I mean, I think it is important enough to call out, and, you know, maybe not as a separate sentence. We could integrate it into the protect natural resources and daylight waterways where feasible. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing about calling it out in this section is that I don't think people naturally think about the environment when they're thinking about industrial areas. And so it just is like a place that's, you know, unique in talking about this type of thing. And so it might be beneficial from that perspective.
Yes,
I think there's opportunity.
that's exactly what I was going for.
Okay.
Maybe we just leave it to a design choice, because I could see, you know,
Yeah,
defining the history of, you know, what is Minthorn. You know, most people aren't going to know what daylighting in, but most people aren't going to know what Minthorn natural area is, for that matter. And so we could find ample opportunities to draw attention to factoids and definitions that could be found elsewhere to make them easier. And
I agree with that, and again, so my initial question to the commission was, is it clear why Daylight the Creek is here and what that means, and would it help to have a call-out box for it? And then I followed that a little bit further down, which is like, well, actually here in the industrial area section where we're talking about daylighting a creek, it might actually be helpful to explain a little bit more about why this is here in this section, and that would be specific kind of to the Minthorn, you know, Creek system, but not, you know, not just because it's one of my favorite policies, but because it does seem kind of weird to have this, oh, let's protect natural areas and do this restoration in an industrial area. Well, I mean, actually it makes sense, and it's a valuable thing to do. So it's a good opportunity, I think, you know, to call out, to provide some context for why is this here and what does it mean?
I support the call out.
Everybody okay with the call-out?
Yes.
Call it out.
Yep.
Can I ask, why don't we bring up the Three Creeks area?
It's not in the city.
Okay.
You know,
Could we say and other surrounding?
as you go down and get to the regional center, you might mention that. We have,
Okay.
we have some policies here about the regional center, which is outside the city.
Okay.
Okay. Johnson Creek Industrial Area, 8.1.7.
Are we not calling out daylighting for B? And
I don't think there's as much
There isn't any.
there.
It's a little big to run through a pipe.
Yeah, the creek flows all the way, open all the way through, I mean, from Foster.
Yeah.
And riparian areas? Well, okay. I'm getting out of my zone of expertise here.
There are some buried small tributaries of Johnson Creek that I can think of in the Portland side, but I
Yeah, I
can't
don't
think
know
of any
about-
in the Milwaukee side.
I don't know about any from the south.
Yeah, I'm from the north, Errol Creek.
Right, yeah.
It's buried in places.
More sloped to the north.
So no is what I'm hearing.
I can't think of any examples. I don't know that means, that because we can't think of any examples, that it doesn't mean we don't call it out as, you know, a viable policy. I mean,
Oh, but
daylight, it would be daylighting tributaries as opposed to daylighting the main channel.
right, but the International Way is a big district. The Johnson Creek Industrial Area is relatively small. Well, I don't know, do you guys call all of Johnson Creek the industrial district, all the way up to the city planning office?
Well, there's a large swath of industrial land there on the north, mostly on the north side, but there's some on the south side as well.
Right. Is that all considered the Johnson? It's not just Precision and
No, it's
Johnson Creek
also
Rental and...
manufacturing on the north side.
Precision cast parts out to past,
To the city planning?
Yeah.
Or even beyond that, I mean,
you know, we've got the general policy on 823H.
Okay.
So, you know, do we need to call it out every time?
No.
You know, if there's a good opportunity it might make sense to call it out.
It's certainly specific to International Way. We know that it's a problem, but in the Johnson Creek, not necessarily.
Yes.
Okay, 8.1.8.
That's why.
If new development includes a commercial component, require a storefront design? C?
On corridors?
Yeah.
Well, we require a storefront design for, or we have design standards for storefronts in all the other zones, right?
We do.
And you don't necessarily have a storefront design standard in a residential zone.
No, where we don't have it is in the GC zone or the,
CL,
or the CL, thank you.
but we're eliminating those zones
We
technically,
probably
right?
will eliminate those zones, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, so what you're thinking is that currently the corridors are either a CG or a CL?
The corridors are where we have commercial corridors that, there's the commercial CG node out at Linwood and King, and there's some CLs that are probably more hub-like than anything else.
Right, the little store down there on
The other
42nd
corridors-
Johnson Creek or whatever
The
that
other
is.
corridors are already zoned with storefront type standards.
So that's your answer.
Okay.
The NMU zone has that already. But again, I mean, some of our policies that we've written backfill policy language to code that we've already got.
So, yeah, I mean, what this is saying is if someone wants to put an office on a corridor, they need to have a storefront design to their office.
Okay.
8.1.9, Regional Center.
Well, I want to address that we had some public comment on 8.1.8, and staff makes a very good point. That one was to add in a distance between, the transit areas, and we decided that we're going to kind of leave it a little generic. But I'm not so, the public suggestion in B says, ensure that design standards require direct pedestrian connections to the closest transit line, and the comment is add in the form of sidewalks. Now, the question is that a little too specific?
Yes.
I think so. I don't think it has to be sidewalks, but we do want a safe pedestrian connectivity. And so,
You could put the word safe in there.
Safe sidewalks?
Safe, direct pedestrian
Accessible.
connections. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, accessible.
Safe, accessible, and direct.
Don't they have to be accessible and safe, and, I mean,
Yeah.
safe to some degree?
No.
Well, if we.
they don't have to be
Not-
safe.
If you're talking a sidewalk, they do.
Yeah,
But this is just saying pedestrian connect, so, I mean, you could put in a dirt path if you wanted to, and then it wouldn't be ADA compliant. Or you could just say, oh, well, this road is, and it's full of potholes and stuff.
Or it could be a pathway through a parking lot,
Right.
I don't know.
I like adding the term safe in addition to direct. I think of accessible as being implicit, but I'm also comfortable adding that term.
I
as
like
well.
safe. I like the word safe, and just leaving it at that.
okay. It's a design standard, so I'd hope it is accessible. and-
Correct.
But
And not a dirt path.
Because it's new construction, and we're not talking about existing access
Correct.
connections. Then accessible is not needed if it's only.
well, then, if it's a design standard, then why don't we put in the form of sidewalks?
Because it could be a path.
Right, like a asphalt path.
Right. But safe ensures at least there's maybe some lighting there, or,
Which, wouldn't that be a design standard?
well, I don't know, do we have design standards for
Yes.
how to get to transit and corridors?
We do for
Sidewalks?
streets.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have standards for pathways other than them not being pervious. Or they have to be pervious. That's about the only standard I can think of. We don't have anything about lighting on pathways.
So the reason I'm kind of focusing on with this discussion focusing on this is because our SEPTED policy, the crime prevention through environmental design policy that we looked at earlier, that refers to using those principles in the public realm. We replace transportation corridors within the public realm. Doesn't necessarily capture a pedestrian pathway on private property. You know what I mean? And so by adding in safe to the list of adjectives here, I think we're kind of pushing, that direction a little bit intentionally rather than implicitly. And in that same sense, I would be happy to add accessible, but, it's how lengthy of a list of adjectives do we?
Maybe we don't, on the next page, we have D, which is all new development contributes to a safe, well-connected, and attractive pedestrian environment. And so
that's fine, too.
It's not necessary to change.
I'll concede to that.
Because if B is really just about the transit.
The things you learn when you flip the page.
Okay, but do we need to do in the form of sidewalks for B?
I don't think we need to specify that.
I don't think so either. I think it then excludes other things.
Yeah.
So no changes to B.
Commissioner Hammer?
I thought it was safe. No?
I think we're saying that safe is captured by D.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Sure that design standards require safe and direct pedestrian connections, right?
No.
And then look at D.
Next page.
I think your design standards should be safe. I don't know. But if, once again, all somebody has to say is just shut up, Greg, and I'll be happy to, if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted.
I think they should be safe too, but I think we can move on to 8.1.9.
You got two.
I'm saying for the record, like not in the, it doesn't need to be in the policy, but in principle.
I'm fine either way.
I'm good with leaving it like it is.
Let it go.
Moving on.
8.1.9.
Well, we have another comment for an 8.8, and it's a couple with that deal with E, and it's another part about adding in,
Form, style, and quality.
yeah.
So we already discussed E,
all right.
and you said that you were happy with the transition language.
All right, I'm just trying to be consistent with what I'm doing here. Once again.
Can I go to 8.1.9 now?
Yes, please. So 819, Denny had a good suggestion there, which is how does Three Creeks maybe fit into, the Three Creeks natural area perhaps fit into regional center policies? And I think that that's probably not a bad idea to include a policy to consider the future of Three Creeks. But, I mean,
It could be along the same lines that you've done before, which was just sort of basically stating, protect Johnson Creek, riparian area. You could, in this list within the regional center, it could be protect the riparian function of the Three Creeks natural area or something.
and its tributaries.
However you want to word it.
Yep.
Why are all of the policies in B sub-bullets as
I don't
opposed
know.
to standalone policies?
Oh, I was
because
gonna
Denny
hit on
wrote it?
that. Yeah, I
Did
think
you write
it's
this
the
one,
only
Denny?
place we do bullets.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened with the Willamette Greenway section, so.
Yeah.
And the regional center, we're talking specifically about the Clackamas Regional Center,
It's-
not
correct.
regional centers in
Which is
general.
larger than the shopping center.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the policy 8.1.9 should be the Clackamas Regional Center policies, because it's not general like corridors, it's specific like
Name it
NMIA
out, yeah.
and specific like international.
Oh, the title?
Yeah.
I mean, we only have one regional center.
Right, because in A, you actually call it out, zoning for the Clackamas Regional Center.
So I think it
Used
just
to
needs
have
to be
two.
reworked for consistency with the other large areas that have specific policies. So it would be Clackamas Regional Center policies, and then it would develop and adapt a planning framework and zoning, recognize it, you don't need to call it out. Is within the-
I agree with that.
So the bullets would be B, C, D, E, and F?
I think that's right.
And then an additional one to protect the Three Creeks natural area and riparian zones and tributaries, or however we want to phrase that so it's consistent with Johnson Creek. Protect Johnson Creek and the adjacent riparian areas.
I would rather say consider than protect, because I really think the only way that you're going to make the connection from Happy Valley to Milwaukee on, whatever, railroad / Harmony / Lake / whatever the name of that road is all the way, Sunnyside, is that you got to put a freeway through the Three Creeks area to connect it to 224.
We've already fought that battle. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Maybe not today. So I would rather say consider than protect, if it were me.
I'm a vote for protect.
I'm up for protect as well.
I'm neutral.
I've already lost. You can go ahead and say it.
Let it go? No.
Could
I
I
mean,
take, could
yeah,
I
go
take
ahead.
us back to something John Henry brought up before, and I don't know where we landed. You said something about making 8.1.9 reference Clackamas Regional Center. Is that,
The title of the policy would be Clackamas Regional Center Policies.
okay. Regional center is a bullet point in the definition of center that seems to describe something that could be a regional center but is not Clackamas Regional Town Center
The glossary?
in the glossary.
Yeah, I mean, a regional center is a metro designation, and so there are, however many regional centers there are around the metro area. Downtown Milwaukee was once designated as a regional center and was downgraded itself voluntarily to be a town center. But then now, the Clackamas Regional Center, which is a regional center and is developing as such, is within the planning area, and so is future Milwaukee. And so there is there's a need to capture regional center policies. The question is, do you do it in the abstract or do you do it specifically too?
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, how often do these designations change?
I think within the definition, we could add that, there are no current regional centers in the city of Milwaukee, but the Clackamas Regional Center is within our urban growth management area.
Yeah.
And, the only other place potentially large enough would be at 82nd and Johnson Creek, but.
Which is part of the Clackamas Regional
Yeah,
Center
yeah,
anyway.
It does extend all the way up there, yeah.
It does. It's along the whole corridor, the whole 82nd Avenue corridor to the Portland city limit.
So it does make sense to do all of policy 8.1.9 in the specific for Clackamas Regional Center, but the definition of regional centers in general is relevant for the regional context.
Correct. Both of those things are I think would be correct to do. I don't think that we're going to be looking at another regional center anywhere within the city limits.
The Mall Plus.
Because it's called out as town center in the glossary.
So we'll look at the definition of regional center and
Is
make that consistent with the policy language.
I just don't, I'm just
And add the protections
Yeah, so can
or
Commissioner Edge,
consideration.
so was it protect the riparian areas in the Three Creeks area and
It's tributaries.
its tributary?
Consider protecting.
About protect the Three Creeks natural area, including, I had adjacent riparian zones and tributaries.
That's fine.
Yep.
Moving on.
8.2. The main header there. Everyone okay with that?
I just don't like the word help.
I agree.
Just cross it off, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just remove it. Go to 8.2.1 and all of those subparagraphs.
I don't have anything.
Anyone have anything under 8.2.1?
Yes, I do. I would like to add in I would like to add in a K that basically says maintain public right-of-way for all modes of transportation.
So all public right-of-way has to accommodate all modes of transportation in every case, even if it's a 15-foot alley.
Yeah, it should be paved, and it should, if it's, it should be covered with potholes and make sure the potholes aren't there. If it's in the public right-of-way, yeah.
So a public right-of-way that is currently only a pedestrian pathway would need to accommodate all
Okay,
modes.
so what my original thing was maintain streets for all modes of transportation. But I thought that wasn't going to fly.
But modes include buses, you know?
Sure.
And trains
And cars.
And and trains.
Okay, fine.
and boats.
Yeah, sure.
I'm against adding that one. Sorry.
I don't know who's going to be driving a boat down a road unless if it's in a trailer, and I don't know who's going to be driving a train if there isn't a track,
I don't know who's going to be driving a car if there isn't a road.
right?
But you might walk it.
I think it's ridiculous that in this whole entire policy, we don't even actually talk about maintaining a road. And look, they may not be fossil fuel-driven vehicles, but we're going to have electric hybrids all over the place, so they still need to go somewhere. Your buses still need to be able to go somewhere.
It sounds like the question that you've got is more focused on road maintenance or facility maintenance, more so than about maintaining it for this range of modes. So
No. What I want to do is I want to promote a great pedestrian bicycle environment, okay? Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure that somewhere in here that we understand that vehicles are part of it too, and that if we maintain the roads and fill up the potholes and stuff like that, it's safer for the bicycles and it's safer for the pedestrians as well. So what I say all modes of transportation is because the safety of the bicyclists and the safety of the pedestrians really rely heavily on the safety of the vehicle that's driving on it.
But what about a pedestrian street? A public street, it's a pedestrian street.
Okay. So what's your hang up?
You're saying all modes in the public right-of-way. You might have a public right-of-way that there's a perfectly fine policy reason.
What other word, unless if you totally disagree with my idea, if you totally disagree with that, then that's something totally different. What word would you like to use instead of public right-of-way? Or would you rather say for different modes of transportation?
I mean, so different modes of transportation will be accommodated on streets with different classifications. And there might be a street with a classification eventually that is a pedestrian street, you know, and there's, you know.
Right, but nobody's going to be driving a car down on a pedestrian street, by definition.
But it's a public right-of-way, and you're saying that maintain the public right-of-way for all modes, right?
I guess.
We're specifically in the pedestrian and bicycle environment policy, so it's appropriate that this particular policy would not call out you go out of its way to call out broader uses under this particular policy. It does raise the question of should there be a vehicle, you know, motorized and electric vehicle environment that says, you know, bearing in mind that we're under urban design and land, you know.
Well, we don't
have that in this.
Right. The problem is that we have policies to promote walking and bicycling, policies to eliminate parking, policies to integrate the urban and natural environment, and policies to promote community character. We don't have any policies to promote vehicle.
Efficient vehicular.
So I thought, well, this is probably the best spot to kind of stick this in.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, you know, Commissioner Burns, what he's alluding to is it probably would be more appropriate to have it in a separate policy that covered things like transit and freight and individual motor vehicles, as opposed to having it within the pedestrian and bicycle environment policies. As opposed to adding it as a K, it would be 8.2. 6, or squeeze it in somewhere within the existing 5.
So under goal 8.2, we're talking about enhancing livability. And the mechanism for doing that is by establishing urban design concepts and standards that help improve the form and function of the built environment. So it's really about enhancing livability. And so we talk about the pedestrian and bicycle environment. We talk about, you know, parking design. We talk about natural environment integration, public space design policies, and community character design policies. And so, you know, maybe it would be appropriate to have an additional policy that referenced how we enhance livability with urban design concepts and standards that help you know, again, enhance livability through standards related to motor vehicle movement and freight movement and whatever. I mean, that would be the you know, that's how you would fit it in under goal 8.2, is it would be about enhancing livability by having standards for these other things. And so how would standards for these other things, what policies to drive standards for these other things would enhance livability?
Fewer potholes is what I think you were getting at.
Well, right, and, you know, and I mean, really what you want to do is you want to make sure that crossing, you know, push the button for the crossing walks that light up, which enhance livability, or at least the pedestrian environment. All the things that are meant for vehicles to be alerted to, and to make it safer for them to be out on the roads with all this other modes of transportation.
What if on 8.2.1A, prioritize enhancements for safety and the environment for pedestrians, bicyclists, people using active transportation modes, and motorists when expending public funds on street improvements? Something to that effect.
I've got an attempt at getting
You're
at
gonna
this.
one-up me?
I'm going to try.
All right, here we go.
It's going with a new policy, but it was something like ensure multi-purpose transportation facilities where bicycle and pedestrians are present are well maintained. I don't like it now that I read it out loud.
Did you write that yourself?
Yeah, I tried. Yeah. Mrs. Annarini would not approve. Sure.
We heard about her last week.
Where Well, I was trying to get at the idea of this multi-purpose transportation facility with bicycle and pedestrians, and that those facilities are well-maintained. And I could play with this for a minute, and I would probably get it in a better form, but is that what you're saying, Greg? Or are you saying something else?
No, yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that we ignore the vehicle in this pedestrian bicycle environment, which is not necessarily something that you should be ignoring, because it is probably makes it the most unsafe part, the vehicle, to the pedestrian and to the bicyclist. Now, there's lots of ways that you can make sure that the pedestrian, bicycle, and the vehicle can all play together nicely. One is making sure that the roads are all maintained, for sure.
So would the addition of a K be enough, or are you proposing, is it larger in scope as far as your
I don't
desire?
care. I want to capture the idea that the vehicle, the bus, the car, the individual car, the motor scooter, the skateboard, I mean, the thing that is not a bicycle or even an e-bike, which I don't think is necessarily a bicycle either. I think it's a motorized vehicle.
I guess my question was, is it limited enough in scope, your proposed additions, that it would fall within 8.2.1, or do you think it warrants its own new policy to?
I was trying to put it in somewhere where it would fit within but if we want to make a new policy, we can make a new policy.
I just wanted to have the context of how much additional language surrounding motorized vehicles you think should be included within the livability section.
I don't think it needs to be a lot. I just think it at least needs to be mentioned.
Okay, how about, I'll try one more. I don't know if this is much better than the last time, but let's try it. Ensure that multi-purpose transportation facilities are well-maintained in order to enhance safety for bicycle and pedestrians.
That would fit under 8.2.1 as a K.
That was a K.
Yeah.
That was a new one.
I mean, I'm fine for prioritized enhancement of the environment for motorized vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and other people using active transportation modes when expending public funds on street improvements.
No, you can't prioritize enhancement of the environment for motorists in the pedestrian and bicycle environment. They are actually they're actually contradictory to each other. I mean, when you're talking about livability in motor vehicles, you're talking about protecting everybody that's outside of those motor vehicles from the motor vehicles. That's how you enhance livability relating to motor vehicles.
Okay, so I'm fine with that. Come up.
I mean, and I think that we're capturing that, where we're saying, that we have policies related to pedestrian safety and, safe design. And, I think we're largely capturing that without a new policy.
If you'd like, we could take a quick few-minute break and try to develop some language. I've seen some clinical studies on the effects of 2.5 hours of continuous policy discussion, and this is generally the results. So we could take a quick break and work on some language.
Well, we can move on to 8.2.2.
I would appreciate a quick break. Whether we use it to workshop your policy or not, I don't care. I need the break.
Okay, I got it.
But if we are going to use it to workshop the policy, I'm not sure that I understand what you're asking for, and if what
I
Denny
think
just proposed is close. So maybe you can comment on that proposal.
So, Denny, read the last thing that you wrote. You're talking about putting in a brand new, whole new
8.21K, 821K. Ensure that multi-purpose transportation facilities are well-maintained in order to enhance safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. And I think I'm suffering a little bit.
And you could talk about their interactions with motorized. I mean, if you're talking about making sure that there's hawk signals and, enhanced crosswalks and things like that for the intersection between motorized vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. If that's what the emphasis is on, then yes, I think we could have a policy, maybe need some additional work on it. If it's more just kind of saying, yes, in general, when we're talking about the quality of the built environment, that we need to just give more attention to motorized vehicles, then, if we want to expand beyond that in the interaction with the pedestrian and bicycle environment, then I think that's something that doesn't fall within 8.2.1. I think that's something that would be in its own.
So I think I'd rather see it be in its own. And I think, especially in the livability section, I think livability means a lot, that if you have, that you have a safe way in your vehicle so that you don't hit a bicycle or a pedestrian, and that you have, good roads and good grid patterns and stuff like that to be able
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this will be covered in the transportation section, but we're obviously not updating that at this point, and so it's kind of one of those weird areas.
I mean, it's sad that transportation is totally focused on the vehicle, I guess. And it's sad that in the livability section, we only focus on bicycling and pedestrian and ignore everything else. Because
I think that was, that may be intentional.
No, I know it's intentional.
And so, understanding that it's intentional, do we want to continue to debate it? I think it's an interesting conversation, but the CPAC didn't add it. It's intentionally excluded. Do we want to continue to debate the virtue of bringing that in?
If this commission does not feel that that is an important issue to bring in, then just say, shut up, Greg.
I think we can move on, Greg.
It's too bad.
I think we need a recess.
All
I'll be
right.
back at 9:10.
9:10.
All right, I think everyone's back now. So where are we on 8.2.1? Is there anything that that anyone wants to change?
I was going to suggest we add a period to B.
I think that's one that we can accommodate. Okay. No other changes to 8.2.1?
We need to kill the 2 on H.
Sure. We don't need to lead with 2.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, 8.2.2,
Okay.
parking design.
So in A, we currently refer to established parking standards that rely on higher levels of active transportation, et cetera. I'm suggesting that we change that to say established parking standards that contribute to increased active transportation use, et cetera. So rather than rely on, contribute to. It speaks to being more intentional.
Any comments on that change?
Agree.
How does that play out, I guess? So if you're talking about ratios of parking that's required, how does it contribute?
You find data that justifies the decisions that you make that contributes to this outcome. And so the data is out there and you can look it up, and the CPIC would theoretically do that when they establish those, the ratios.
Okay.
So would that be like reducing parking so that people are encouraged to use other methods of transportation?
That is theoretically one. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that, there's actually, you can look and see what data, would contribute to, a higher mode split of, transit users or bicycling or pedestrians or whatever. And then there would be data that would justify having certain parking ratios that, produce an outcome. I mean, rather than just create an environment, it produces, you're intentionally making decisions because you want to get there. And so that data exists, and it might be, setting specific standards. It might be, those standards might change over time as data changes. And so it's really just about being intentional about it rather than relying on something. We would be intentionally trying to achieve that thing.
I could agree.
Okay. You got that one?
Got it.
Staff? Okay. Any other comments on 8.2.2?
On E, we specifically refer to people who cannot walk or bike. And what I think that we're getting at here is that we want to ensure equitable access for people of all abilities. Some people might need to drive, and some people may not have the driving option. And so we just want to make sure that everybody has access in the way that they need it.
Yeah, so say E with your...
Ensure equitable access for people of all abilities.
2.
But this is about public and private parking.
Yeah, so I mean, it's fine. I'm just saying you're just changing the language to people of all abilities instead of that cannot walk or bike.
All right, so is your line ensure that public and private parking remains available for
People of all abilities?
For people with all abilities?
Well, it's in the parking design section, and it's about access for people of all abilities. I'm not, it's fine if you want to say the first part. I don't think it's necessary.
I think E is very clear. It's relatable, it's understandable.
And that's fine. My priority is not for those who cannot walk or bike. My priority is for people of all abilities.
I think this policy is saying that we're talking about reducing parking, but not always making sure that there's enough for those who cannot walk or bike.
Yeah.
I support the policy as written.
Okay. That's fine.
Just as editorial note, I would ask that the staff put periods behind E, F, and H.
I was going to say that.
I withdraw.
That's all I got for 822.
Okay. Other comments on 8.2.2? All right, 8.2.3.
So I don't know that for C, that a public benefit associated with the project should be necessary here.
Agreed.
What? Say that again?
There's the end of C reads, and there is a public benefit associated with the project. I think we can strike that language
Just allow vertical landscaping or green roofs.
to substitute for ground landscaping in situations where sites are constrained, period.
I agree.
I don't understand 8.2.3A.
Okay, are we agreed on that last change to C, though?
Agree.
Okay. And what was your comment?
I don't understand 8.2.3A.
We don't necessarily do this today.
Maintain landscaping design standards that require landscape plan approval as part of the development review process. So is it, the development review process applies to the landscape plan or the landscaping design standard?
It's not as well written as it should be. Basically, it's saying have requirements where you must submit a landscape plan for the part of the development review process.
I think we potentially could just remove the first, everything before require.
Yeah, probably.
Require landscape plan approval as part of the development review process.
Correct.
That I understand.
That's what it should have said.
That's cool. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Got that?
Tracking? You look confused.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Anything else on 8.2.3? Let's go to 8.2.4.
So on C, the multi-season seating in public places, not really sure why that is required.
It is in a lot of other areas. Are you just multi-season? Is that the thing that's like
Well, I guess, okay, so
unprotected
like,
bench is not acceptable, or?
yeah, I mean, I don't know what that multi-season seating, I was just trying to figure out what that,
Does that mean a canopy or something like that?
It might be shade protection in the summer and rain protection in the winter.
That's what it means.
Areas of public seating should have access to direct sunlight and shade, and then rain protection for every public space.
Every park bench in every park, there needs to be one bench under cover and one bench not under cover.
Is that how it plays out?
I think this is specifically where people are intended to gather.
So a park.
Well, I mean, not just, individually wander through, but gather, like at the amphitheater at the riverfront park, or...
Which will not be all season.
I'm just saying.
That's one area.
Yeah.
Seems like this could be left to like the park master plan and allow some context.
I mean, what are some other public spaces that aren't parks, though, I guess? Like
The plaza.
plaza.
The right-of-ways?
So we would require multi-season seating in the plaza.
Or a bench on the sidewalk?
No, I think we need to focus on where people are intended to gather. I mean, and so you're gathering for like an event, you're gathering for a thing, right?
Well, I think this policy started as provide seating.
Okay.
People are intended. Okay?
Then they wanted cup holders, right?
And then it evolved. So
I don't think this is a good policy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's trying to stay away from providing multi-season seating in all public spaces. But I agree, it's not terribly clear.
Why don't you
do we
just,
want seating?
Yeah,
How about a qualifier like where appropriate, or something like that?
where appropriate.
I mean, I think,
Really broad and then also really narrow.
why don't you just say provide seating in public spaces where people are intended to gather, and then get rid of the rest?
But how much seating?
You could
I
do
guess
that.
I'd like, what is enough?
it's
Or-
the idea that, I don't know,
Well, you could write a code that says 1 per acre if you wanted to.
but
Oh, yeah, you would drill down into the code.
Adequate.
Adequate.
Just add adequate.
Adequate seating.
Yeah, I mean, you could say adequate seating, and if you wanted to, you could say with consideration of some sort of weather. I mean, if you wanted to have that protection.
Okay,
There you go.
with consideration. I think that's
Of
fine
weather
to do
protection
the
or something along those lines.
considering of it, but to require it just seems really, I don't know.
I agree. I'm kind of concerned that this
It's out of hand.
paints us into a corner here.
Yeah. I mean, we want public spaces, we want the pedestrian, we want the interaction in the public realm, but that's going to be prohibitive if somebody's like, wait, I got to get the shade and the cup holders. So I like what you said, David, about provide adequate seating in public spaces where people are intended to gather, consider,
With consideration of some sort of weather protection.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's great.
Good.
as appropriate.
Okay, 8.2.5.
I would like to add an E that would basically say, use appropriate size and scale of buildings throughout each zone.
Say again?
Use appropriate size and scale of buildings throughout each zone.
Do you want to say massing and building form
We could do that. We could use that
for
same
consistency?
language.
What was the first one?
Setbacks, massing.
Does that create any
Height, massing, setback,
unintended
building form.
consequences by doing that?
I think it might.
I think we already have some of that discussion within the previous policy language, but if we did have something that could kind of capture it in the general terms, I think there were a lot of comments on, especially from regarding the potential addition of a goal 8.4. I think it can largely be captured in this area. It's a question of what the appropriate level of detail and what that language should read like.
Well, and so basically what would happen is that you can get down in the code and you can change whatever your zone building height is or whatever you want. But I think that, the zone should dictate that height.
And it does.
Yeah, so why don't we just go ahead and put it on in? We have had residents come up here that have been showing pictures of Sellwood where they think that they're going to, and the only answer that they've had back is the city saying, well, trust us. Why don't we put in one line that actually says what they're going to do?
My concern would be if it conflicts at all with the legislation related to House Bill 2001 from last year. There's some language in there about not having onerous design standards that ultimately limit, the use of the middle housing,
So we can have siting and design standards. You can't make them so onerous or so restrictive that they basically make it impossible to develop this type of housing. As far as some of the comments about just trust us that it's not going to be Sellwood, I think we tried to explain that Sellwood is not what middle housing is. When you have a 4-story apartment building with 100 units in it, that's not it, and that's not what we're proposing, and that's not what we're required to do. But yeah, if commissioners kind of come up with some general language.
What was your proposal again, Greg?
Use appropriate size and scale of buildings throughout each zone. Now, what I'm going to say now is use appropriate height, massing, setbacks, and building form throughout each zone.
And that's where I worry a little bit about compatibility with HB 2001.
Is it throughout the zone or where zones transition?
No, well, throughout each zone. An R7, an R10, and an MU. It has nothing to do with the House bill.
We do that.
All I'm saying is that if you add it in this line, you have satisfied all the people that have come and testified that worried about Sellwood, and they don't have to rely on your word that says trust us.
But
There are plenty of places where we have redundant policies because they're under a different goal or a different heading. And so I kind of think I agree with you, Commissioner Hemer, that this is the one place where we have a chance to talk about community character, and we have heard a lot about it. And so if we're not going to add it here, we are going to ignore the only opportunity, the one place where we could
Makes sense to
waive
put
that
it.
testimony.
I wasn't saying, well, all I was saying is that doesn't say anything, Greg. You're saying use these within each zone to accomplish what? That's kind of where I was going. Is it to define community character? Is it to
Yes, actually. It's
blend in with other development? Is it to make the transition?
No. It helps to define the community character, because what it does is that if you have a traditional neighborhood that has, typically 35-foot tall buildings in it, that you're basically saying, hey, look, we're not going to put something that's going to be taller or bigger or massive or more inside that area, unless if it's zoned differently than what that zone is.
My worry is by use of the word appropriate, you're using kind of a subjective, and if the underlying code provides something, then that becomes appropriate if the code provides it. So if you say use appropriate massing and whatever, then if the code provides for a certain type of massing or a certain type of setback, then that becomes appropriate.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would also note that, there have been plenty of public comments insinuating that we've already decided to implement a fully form-based code, which we haven't. That's going to be some discussion within the implementation work. But I mean, in a way, if you're just talking about appropriate mass and scaling, I mean, that's essentially an argument for a form-based code. And so, yeah, I guess just trying to think of a good way to say it.
Well, use standards that address size and scale to define community character. Is that too strong? Is that too, I mean,
No, because nobody can define community character. It's just like the same thing, what was the thing that we always used in the downtown thing, Milwaukee character?
neighborhood character to define, I guess what I'm thinking is we already do that to some extent. We have different zones that have different standards.
Correct.
And I expect that when we implement House Bill 2001, it's going to be sort of within that context. It's going to use size, dimensional standards, and other types of physical requirements to define the building envelope for whatever use we're going to allow there.
Right. So why can't we just put in a line that says that?
I think we probably can, but it's not. But it's what I don't know that what you offered said that to me anyway. Because it was like what are we trying to accomplish with that? Because we do it. Today we have these different dimensional standards that cap height, bulk, size, not necessarily bulk, but we have things that are related to the size of the lot.
I think one way to potentially phrase it would be to, consider size, bulk, and building form when considering additional permitted uses in areas. I mean, something a little more eloquent than that, but if it's this concept of, there might be a fourplex in my neighborhood and we're worried that it's not going to fit in. I mean, there is no reason you can't fit a quadplex within 35 feet in height and 2.5 stories.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think it's finding that appropriate language of how to convey that.
Well, maybe we should say maintain height, massing, setbacks, and building forms throughout each zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think consider and maintain are obviously two kind of different concepts. Maintain commits us to not going beyond what's already allowed. When, say, we didn't have a House Bill 2001 mandate, or we weren't considering expanding our housing options.
Yeah, but
you're stuck at
so
what you have.
I get maybe duplex, quadplex, sixplex. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, about this, Greg, consider compatibility with existing resident, and existing uses when changing the height, mass, bulking standards.
Well, I use standards for size, bulk, and scale to encourage compatibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Within each zone?
Or something like that.
Okay, that's fine.
We can work on that language and, call it out within the staff report. This is one of the few that I think we're really adding. So.
I think it's important to add for all the residents that came up here and testified.
I agree.
Anything else for 8.2.5?
Is the display characteristics of commercial signage, does that mean like animated digital signs?
It surely does.
Should we be more explicit about that?
Where are you, John?
Sorry, 8.2.5A, limit the size and display characteristics of commercial signage. I think we're saying that if display characteristics means let's avoid distracting animations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could add something to that.
Are we legally allowed to do this?
You betcha.
Oh,
We can't affect the content, but you can definitely restrict the size of a sign. And
okay, it's not an ODOT thing? It's
Yeah.
like not out of our purview? Okay.
I don't believe so.
I thought I heard the city manager speak about that at one point.
We can definitely regulate the, how often they change copy and how often they,
Oh, but can we regulate how frequently they exist? That's the ODOT thing, right?
how many there are.
Yeah,
I think we can. I mean,
really?
yeah.
I thought
mean,
there
we
was
can't-
lawsuits about this, and
There's a big, long history
Yeah.
around how the highway signs are.
there's lobbies a bit, yeah.
I mean, I think when Kim and I were new, we reviewed some
Sign
sign code changes about making them much smaller than they previously could be. So we've presented recommendations to council that were then adopted along these lines. And we've had public testimony
Oh,
at
yeah.
other times about folks just coming in and saying, can you guys do something about the size of these and
Yeah.
the distracted animations? Remember Gary Klein came in
Gary
and
Klein, yeah.
gave a
And most billboards are on private property.
Well, they're all on private property.
Okay. I just swear somebody said so much as that.
You
Might
can't,
have been Ann, maybe not.
Well, like anything else land use related, I mean, you need to have a nexus between the regulation and the rationale. And then it needs to be obviously vetted in some case law.
Okay?
I suspected that display characteristics was referring to the animation, but it wasn't obvious to me, and I thought we could make it more obvious, but I don't have a suggestion, and if no one else does,
Should we just
can
add
move on.
animation and keep and display characteristics?
I mean, is display characteristics a term that should be in the glossary or something? Is that like an official?
I don't think so. You could
Term.
go limit the size and display characteristics of commercial signage. You could,
The reason why you can't just say display is because then it looks like they are taking away somebody's First Amendment rights.
Well,
So you say display.
you're not changing the context.
Well, but if you say limit size and display, you do. That's why you say display characteristics.
it wasn't thought about that
Which is
much.
supposed to mean electronic.
It was about the nature of those electronic billboards, It was,
But isn't this
Maybe just adding.
general enough? And then the code can take care of whether it's Luigi or, whoever,
Maybe just adding of electric signs or,
They fall under the general commercial signage,
okay.
whether
Okay.
they're electric or not, so.
well, this also gives you a lot of flexibility on what you end up with, what kind of regulation you end up with. It's just saying, address it, try to limit the size today, there are size limits, there are some display characteristic requirements, they don't go very far. You could add number, I suppose.
I'm good with it if we
Yeah.
just.
Go ahead.
On C, encourage green buildings through a program that allows extra building height with the development of a green building.
That's sort of a backfill policy right now. And
Yeah,
we
if-
do that, but we could,
That was my sense. I just, are we supposed to be calling out the climate action plan?
there's a whole chapter on climate action.
I know there is, but should we,
We could do it here, again, if you wanted to, but
because the extra building height piece is just like one, it's very specific and,
yeah, if you want to. We could put We could add it to the sentence even.
Okay.
I'm not sure what, I'm just thinking out loud here.
That's just like in accordance with the climate action plan?
Yeah, or something like that.
that okay?
And
Well, are you want,
through, or and through programs in the, through programs in the climate action plan and that allow.
In accordance with the climate action plan, period, and then not necessarily allow, and then leave out the allows extra building height with development of green
so
buildings.
are you, Commissioner Lisfeld, are you wanting to kind of get more general as far as allowing incentives as opposed to specifically calling out the building height?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it should point towards the climate action plan rather than trying to state specifically one thing, one incentive, which here's the building height.
Well, and I don't know if there, I don't know specifically what programs or elements we have in the climate action plan that encourage green buildings. I know there are some programs that way, but are there incentives that we've outlined? David, you were closer to that than me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think within the program level language.
I mean, it seems like we were doing things to help people convert to solar, to do some things related to switching over to different energy forms, but I'm not sure what else we were doing.
How about something along the lines of encourage green buildings by providing incentives such as extra building height that contribute to increased sustainability and help implement the climate action plan?
That sounds pretty good.
Does this belong under goal 3.5?
Well, this one's an 825.
I know, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, is this
Yeah, it might
a
be.
better fit under 3.5?
Do we say something like that already?
So, I mean, I think what we're looking at here in this particular context is we're looking at community character design policies. And so the design policy is that we're
Sustainability
doing
of
is
character.
we're specific with respect to community character. I think that we're allowing for an override of building height to accommodate green buildings. And so the question is, where do you put that override? Do you put it in the sustainability section, or do you put it here because you're specifically saying that building height, which is a character concern, a community character design concern, shall be overridden in this context, in the context of a green building?
Yeah, I mean, that would be phrased a different way. It would be phrased, allow additional building height, essentially in exchange or conditioned upon, it essentially, I guess you would be saying that the additional sustainability would be a community character. I mean, that would contribute to community character. I mean, I'm trying
Is
to
that
think of
is that intuitive? Is that what we're going for? Is that the sustainability
I
is
just
the
think
community character?
that extra building height is not the only contributing character, and I think sustainability in itself is a character
A community character design element?
that I think Milwaukee is trying to attain.
I think it sounds like it's about balancing, these two issues. I mean, if you're going to allow for additional building height, it needs to be in exchange for, green buildings or something else that contributes to sustainability that, benefits the community. So it's just, I don't know how to say that. That's the intent.
So we're in the enhanced livability goal. We're talking about enhancing livability through community character design policies. And then we have a policy that deals with green buildings and right now building height. And so I was inferring that building height was the character design element that we were addressing here, but if it's the green buildings that are the character design element, then I think I'm kind of on board with what you're saying. I thought height was the thing that we were examining with this policy, the subject of this policy.
I think it's more about
The green
having
buildings.
green buildings in
Okay.
the community, yeah.
Cool.
I think that was the idea, that it was that was a character, hopefully a characteristic of.
Okay.
Can we stop calling them green buildings and call them sustainable buildings? Green buildings.
Whatever you want.
Thanks.
Concur.
Green buildings is a,
So where are we at as far as any proposed edits?
We're changing green to sustainable, and we're replacing building height with,
in accordance with the climate action plan, period. Encourage sustainable buildings in accordance with the climate action plan.
all right, cool, that's good.
I would ask the commission if they're interested in extending the meeting to 10:15. I think we're going to need that time.
I'm happy to give us the buffer, so I move that we extend the meeting until 10:15.
I second.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
We don't have any other option, do we?
8.3.
Maybe we should start meetings earlier.
We're almost done with this part.
Yes,
we're
just
getting
keep
really
on
close.
moving, people. Keep on moving.
Anything for 8.3, the high-level statement?
I think development review can be lowercase.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else in 8.3.1?
Design objectives.
8.3.2.
Excellent.
Put open space.
Do you like that or not like that?
Yep, I'm gonna say it's adequate.
8.833.
Good.
I think it's great.
So very good.
I like that one.
One of my favorites.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah.
Well, that being said,
Very good.
8.3.4.
I think it's an interesting mix of things in here. The home occupation piece it doesn't necessarily fit, but I like it in there. I mean, it's sort of like a laundry list, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting laundry list, but
That one was Ben's, the home occupation thing. I mean, he had mentioned home occupations at one point, and
No, that's an interesting topic, and home occupations are typically, the standards for home occupations typically focus on making the business invisible to the surrounding community. You know, you don't want to have people mechanic working on, motor vehicles in the backyard and making a lot of noise and, and parking, a bunch of customer vehicles out on the street or whatever. We had a guy in my neighborhood that did car detailing, and he would frequently have about 24 of the same brand, like Lexuses or something, all parked out on the street, and the street was substandard, and so it was like 15 feet wide and parked on both sides, just solid, and the county wouldn't do anything about it. So anyway, home occupations are meant to make those kinds of things invisible so that a business can exist, but you don't know it's there. It's just a house. You know, you as a neighborhood resident or someone driving by or walking by, you don't realize that there's a business taking place there. And so this is interesting to have this be in the context of allowing a home occupation to engage the neighborhood rather than hide from it.
Right.
And so this is really interesting to me. And I mean, I
didn't realize that was what that was. This is not in the glossary, since I'm really interested in the glossary tonight. Is home occupations an obvious term to everybody?
It's
Yes,
in the
okay, thanks, John.
in the code itself. It's defined in the code. We've got a section about home occupations that set the standards. This basically says, look at those and
See if there's flexibility to,
Yeah.
for it to be responsive.
And this came from a CPAC member. He gave some examples, especially within Latin America, where there's
Yeah.
easy to open up a restaurant within an existing, even single-family home.
I'm familiar with what that is. I just didn't realize that that's,
Well, I mean, that
That
would
it
be
had
an
a term.
example of where it wouldn't be your traditional home occupation, because you could tell that it was a restaurant, even though it was kind of right in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
And it might be completely appropriate, you know, and desired by the neighborhood, you know, and so I think this is really interesting. I'm interested in this policy and where this goes, but.
So the laundry list is, you know, A, B, C, D, E, and it's not necessarily,
Should they become separate policies because they are so laundry list?
We've got 3 new periods that need to
Yeah, I
go
did
in
notice.
on C, D, and E.
good job.
it just
I'm
seems
always-
like kind of a catch-all, so I don't know.
And
I
it's,
mean,
The period
kinda crazy.
police didn't go to work.
I'm fine with it.
and it's saying we're actually,
You get bothered by that, don't you?
Yeah, you know.
I guess we're in the goal area talking about the design review process along with incentives to achieve desired outcomes. And so, you know, it may feel laundry list-like, but this is the policy that focuses on the incentives part of that goal. So here are the things in which we want to provide incentives for.
Yeah.
so we're providing incentives to consider the use of vertical housing tax abatements. We're going to incentivize someone to consider something.
Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
That's,
I'll consider it for an incentive.
right?
Think about it.
Nope, can't do it. Not feasible.
So would you just,
I think they're separate policies, and then you can kind of tailor whether it's an incentive or a refined standard for each one of these.
I agree.
I think that's a fine approach.
Yeah, it seems odd to lump all of these together.
I see the logic here, but I'm fine with that approach.
I suggest that staff take a pass at it and bring it to
think
us
that
at our
makes
next
sense.
meeting.
How do you want to do it?
I think they're separate policies,
Okay.
and some of them are refined development standards, some of them are incentives, some of them might be both.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good.
okay, anything on 3.5?
Why is this limited to medium density and high density residential as opposed to just all residential or including moderate?
Because, wait, are we eliminating moderate?
We're not now. We have moderate. We've talked about whether we should eliminate it, but through our reviews, we're keeping moderate now with the
Right.
potential to eliminate it later.
I know why this doesn't include low,
Why?
It could be,
because no one's going to do a comp plan amendment to change their land use designation to a lesser
we could
zoning
generalize
designation.
it more by just saying comprehensive plan amendments that increase density or intensity need to do this.
That's fair.
There you go.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, I have one to add, though, in this section. All right. So I would like to offer an 8.3.6, use completed city improvement projects as a trigger for downzoning.
What?
Use completed city improvement projects, CIPs, capital improvement projects, sorry, as a trigger for downsizing, upsizing,
Upzoning.
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 Okay.
Like I said, no one's going to be downzoning.
Right.
Upzoning.
This is our unlock the density policy.
Well, so if the city makes a capital improvement project, let's take 42nd, for example.
Oh, so not a developer doing this to
No, because
open up.
the problem is that you can't guarantee an upzone. So you can't say, well, developer, if you maintain the street, we're going to guarantee you that you can upzone, because you can't do that. Right, because we learned that from Baker versus the city of Milwaukee, actually, that the comprehensive plan actually gives you the zoning, not the other way around, that you can't. So what I'm suggesting is that the city, if you take a street that they have improved, put on all new sidewalks, redid the road, made it so that it's accessible and it's got bike lanes and everything like that, that could be a trigger mechanism for either, I don't know if the city can be an applicant for upzoning, can they?
Yeah.
If
So the city would legislatively rezone.
Right, would bring it in front of the planning commission to upzone it because now it's a much safer street.
It tends to be a landowner requested.
I understand that, but you could also use that to your landowner, saying, hey, look, we've improved this street, and you could say, well, why don't you try to go out for a rezoning thing, and the city can use that as justification for it being a good idea.
Maybe we could get at what you're trying to do with 8.3.5 instead of saying require comprehensive plan map amendment applications, because they encourage comprehensive plan map amendment applications where there are.
No, I think this is a totally different idea. This is a way for the city to measure areas where they can do zone. So you could use it the other way, too. So let's say, hey, we have a bunch of streets that are a quarter mile within a transit area, right? And we want to upzone them. Why don't we set our capital improvement projects towards that, so that once we get that street done, then we can go in front of the planning commission and see if we can't get it upzoned, or in front of city council, or in front of the residents, however you want to call
You
it.
say we, are you referring to the city? Or are you
Yeah, or the
referring to
people,
property
or
owners?
whatever. All I'm saying is that it can work both ways, and in fact, we try to get a mechanism to make sure that we can have these things happen. This is your mechanism.
I mean, you're saying to tie your capital, it is, I think it
Yeah,
does
your
sound like
capital improvement projects to your zoning, or potential for upzoning. It's potential for upzoning. It can't be actual zoning, but it's potential for upzoning.
There's a concept called concurrency, which is when you have certain levels of, basically what it says is you get your upzone, you get your plan amendment, once you have ensured that there is a concurrent level of service available to your property. And what you're flipping that a little bit and saying, if there is this service level available, you are eligible for an upzone.
Right, or the city can upzone it. The city can use it and all I'm saying is a trigger. It doesn't mean that it actually is, as a trigger mechanism.
Right.
So that you could say, the planning and the engineering department can get together and say, hey, you know what, if we have this brand new transit corridor, and if we want to improve, quarter mile walk from it, why don't we do this capital improvement project, and then we can use it as a trigger mechanism to upzone.
Can we figure out a way to put this into sort of the set of tools the CPIC considers? I'm not sure exactly how to draft it as a policy here. So I was wondering if it isn't something that we could put in that set of assignments for them.
I mean, I think if it's limited to, city-initiated legislative amendments, I mean, you could basically keep it as general as consider or evaluate transportation concurrency when considering legislative amendments to the zoning map or something along those lines.
I would really like the words capital improvement projects in there, because that is not only a trigger, that actually sets the stage to allow the engineering department and the planning department and to go to your, and to set a schedule.
But doesn't it already doesn't state law say that for purposes of the transportation planning rule, that things that are on your 5-year CIP basically qualify as having been built already? And so, I mean, isn't that, you can count on things that are already in the CIP as basically that exists, and so you can then, you have that level of service basically available to you?
I'm not sure.
I'm also a little hesitant to include a reference to CIP projects just because we haven't had engineering at the table, and CIP projects have a big impact on our budget and are budget-driven, and so...
Right, so, I mean, that's the whole...
I'm just saying, I don't know that it's appropriate in the comprehensive plan to tie CIP projects to a planning exercise. I'm not saying no, that it absolutely isn't, but I think it bears more consideration than trying to cobble together a policy right here on the spot.
10:05 p.m.
Yeah, I'm not going to support another time extension tonight.
I'm not saying no, Commissioner Heeman.
I know.
It makes me nervous to incorporate something that has such a large budget impact to this document when I don't know that there's many other non-planning related processes that are implicated through this. That's my only thought. I think it bears further consideration than trying to cobble it together. And I don't know if the CPIC's the right place, or we bring it back March 10th and try to hash it out, vet it with people wiser than myself. I
think that this idea that was brought forth before Elvis Clark by Mr. Clark, and I did ask staff before the last meeting to actually come up with something on this, so I thought they were going to be a little prepared. But if that is not...
Our preparation was to think about it and say, maybe that's a CPIC project. That was
I think there's a policy we might get to, but I don't think it can be CIP, because that's means to an end. The end is the improvement.
If that's the decision to make it a CPIC, I won't sit here at this point in time. I think that is I think that is a brilliant idea. I think that is a way that you can actually set forth a schedule for your upzoning. And it works in conjunction with city planning, within the desire of it. And I think that you would accomplish a lot more instead of just kind of randomly picking. Well, I think it's a brilliant mechanism.
I mean, I think the insinuation with that language was that the city is basically planning or plotting to be rezoning large swaths of the city, and that's not the case. Right.
No, but you couldn't because of the budget restraints of the capital. Why, if you all of a sudden have Linwood Avenue that now is walkable, livable, it's everything that we say that we want in these documents, why can't you upzone it? Why can't you change it from a 7 to a 5? It's a corridor.
Yeah, there's approval criteria for the zoning code amendment.
I understand that, but why couldn't you use as a trigger mechanism to bring that forward?
Automatically and not even need to go through the process, or?
Oh, you have to bring it through the process by state law.
Well,
but the planning department could say, hey, city, look, we made these improvements. Why don't we go for an upzone if you guys want more density and more housing?
Yeah, I think it becomes part of the code criteria for a zone change. So today we look at all these different things, and part of that criteria could be spelled out, the recent, I don't know, but it's, again, it comes back to that concept of concurrency. So you've raised the level of service for this corridor through your CIP. Now you're eligible for some kind of a zone change. We can focus in on that or try to write that when we look at the plan amendment criteria that are in the code. And I think that's one of the things we need to do.
Okay.
Motion to continue hearing CPA 201.
Hold on just a second.
01 to a date certain of March 10th. Looking for a second.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I made my motion.
Yep.
I gotta go.
Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I ask that if any of you have comments on the goal,
Overarching section goal.
overarching section goals, why don't you send them to us? And maybe we can,
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that I think it would be useful for us to project the overarching goals onto the screens at our next meeting, so that when we make the changes, we can see them and, and say yea verily and make the changes so that we don't have to do anything else and that they can go forward, hopefully. Then we can go forward with a firm recommendation to the city council. But I think it would help us if we could see them on the screens as we make the changes, so that we have a level of confidence that a high level of confidence that the changes that we want are there. You can see them in black and white or fluorescent, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I'd still like to, if you do have
I'm not throwing that
comments,
away,
send them out.
yeah.
Especially from Kim and Greg, since they're not going to be here.
Yeah, and so as a matter of priority, a lot of these goals have been pinned down by the council. So really what we're looking for is 1, 2, 7, 8, and 12.
Correct.
Okay? Now, I'm not going to say you can't touch anything else, but just keep that in mind that the city council has already pinned these down when we're, doing the whole block process before we went to the section. Okay? So 1, 2, 7, 8, and 12.
And so I didn't hear the motion was for March 10th. I know there was some discussion before about potentially looking at, a special meeting, but it sounds like that might be a little
I think that we
complicated.
can get through the remaining in a regular session. That's my sense, is that we can get through this and address this issue that you brought up.
Just nobody gets sick, because then we don't have enough.
But you're not going to be here.
I won't be here, so you guys, you can vote it down. But I think we've already decided that it's going to be into the CPIC.
Okay. Well, the staff will come back with after they've talked to the city engineers and have a more.
So since I'm not going to be here, I just let me say something real quick. This document is a big change, and that's why you see the resistance from the residents. I want you to understand. This changes us from suburbia to a city. Okay? Now, I wish that there would have been a fourth kind of going over this thing, because I really would love to see an economic evaluation of this, because you have two ideas, the eco sense and the environmental sense, your climate and your environmental, versus housing. And it's going to be interesting to see which one the CPIC picks over one another. The more regulation and the more land you take away, the more expensive housing is. So I just want everybody to kind of realize that when you guys are thinking about this, and maybe make recommendations for the next step, because I know what I already own my house, so I'm all for the environment and I'm all for the eco. But I just want you to think, if you don't have any parking on people's land and everybody drives an electric vehicle, all you're going to do is a bunch of electric cords all over the sidewalks.
Which wouldn't be permitted.
Look at Well, look at really the contradictions that each piece of this has and really think about it. And that's why I wish we would have had that fourth little strategy to kind of look at it.
I'd like to just make a quick announcement. This will be my last meeting because I'm out of town for the March meetings and my term is up. I'm not sure if everybody knew that.
Oh,
So I just
really?
wanted to let you know that it's been a pleasure to serve with you, and I look forward to coming back and testifying in the near future. So, Thank you. Yeah,
We'll miss you.
Thank you for your service.
yeah, thank you for everybody. It's been great.
Yes.
So this was the third marathon session. I want to thank everyone for their patience and passion and support and that kind of thing. And so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Send us out, Kim.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, at least take your tag.
Oh.